Council for June 27, 2018. If you would please all rise for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Roll call, please.
Creighton.
Here.
Raymond.
Here.
Vieira.
Here.
Vineyard.
Present.
Price.
Here.
We have a quorum. Comments from the public. Notice to the public. At this time, any person may comment on any item which is not on the agenda. Please state your name and address for the record. Action will not be taken on an item that is not on the agenda. If it requires action, it will be referred to staff and/or placed on a future agenda. To comment on an item that is on the agenda, please wait until the item is read for consideration. Please limit comments to a maximum of 5 minutes.
Are there any members of the audience today that wish to speak at public comment?
Eric Lee, Atwater. This council is faced with some tough decisions today and a lot of work. But you know, you've got a roadmap for this. It's a map that's been used before. And if you look at it, you'll see markings on it that'll show you detours, other things in the road that you want to avoid. And I think that's what we need to do. And by avoiding things, I mean getting rid of things that make us money, adding things that don't do anything other than cost us money. And I think as we follow this road, we don't want to go back to Frago or Riveroville. I think we want to avoid those towns. It's important that we get this budget in line, and it's very important that we move forward with fiscal responsibility that's going to get this city back on its feet again. Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak at public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment.
So public hearing, adopting the 2018-19 fiscal year budget and approving fund expenditures and fund transfers, amending classification plan and approving salary schedule A19 effective July 1, 2018, and approving terms and conditions for the award of non-exclusive, non-consensual tow service agreements.
Okay, before we get going, let's make sure all of those cell phones are put on vibrate or turned off or thrown in the garbage outside or whatever it takes. But let's not have any disturbances from cell phones, okay, guys? Okay, for those that recall this past Monday, this item and also that which affects tow service agreements and what have you have been continued to today under a public hearing scenario. So with that, I will turn this over to Ms. Waterman here to go ahead and lead us off.
Mayor and Council, the proposed budget is a result of a comprehensive effort by staff and our consultant teams to reduce operating costs and identify revenue opportunities. It fulfills the Council's goal of eliminating our general fund debt to the sewer fund, allocating funds to the general fund reserves, and paying down the city's PERS and OPEB obligations. The budget is just the first step in a process. In the coming fiscal year, we'll be reevaluating all departments for organizational changes and continuing to seek opportunities to ensure our fiscal solvency.
Okay. So, Ms. Deal?
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. There it is. So, as we know, our general fund status is, general fund deficit is about $2.4 million. We do have general fund owes to sewer fund interfund loan worth of $2.3 million. We do have unfunded CalPERS and OPEB liability of $7.7 million. For proposed budget for fiscal year 18-19, it contains a balanced budget with the projected revenues of $14.9 million and with the projected expenditures of $13.2 million. We are contributing or planning to contribute $100,000 towards general fund reserve. We are contributing at least $150,000 each for retirement and OPEB liabilities. We are working towards retiring our general fund deficit entirely. Key revenue contributors are, that is fun to see. This slide has been cut.
Well, it's cut off at the top a little bit there, but you can see it. Community development revenue is obviously increased based on council action on Monday night, and you're going to see references back to that throughout the presentation this afternoon. We are projecting not only a shift to a deposit plus actual return on fees in general, but also a more accurate cost per hour. The revenue stream also includes increased revenues based on the Parks and Recreation adjustments that have been made. We're going to discuss later this afternoon the elimination of the tow yard, and that will be up for discussion, so we can take a look and see what council's preference is going to be on that. When we talk about the reduction of OPEB and other liabilities, and of course, in general, reducing the overall debt, I did want to make a note to council to make sure you understand, while people may look at these numbers and get a little bit freaky about the huge liabilities for PERS, Atwater is not alone in this. This is something that every city in California is struggling with right now, and so the plan that LaQuinter and staff have put together in place is basically to address that and start chipping away, but we're all going to be continuing to watch legislative fixes from the state that would perhaps reduce that liability further. So the things that are being proposed are in keeping with positioning the city to withstand any type of an audit that might come forth from the state legislature, but also reducing rather than not addressing these particular issues. Went to sales?
Sure.
Mayor, could I ask a question?
Certainly.
How do you want to do this with asking questions? Is it, as you guys go through, are we going to,
No, you can interact.
how do you want to do that, Mayor? Do I need to line up?
Well,
or-
be recognized here so we don't
Okay.
have a mishmash of everything else here. But if you have a question right now, go right ahead.
Okay, well, you get to the next part. The next two is what I have concern about.
Well, I think that's a good issue. The budget has two revenue slices in here, one for sale of real property and one for cannabis fees. And I think also when LaQuinter was mentioning the overall revenues of $14.9 million, that also includes these funds, and it's staff's recommendation and in general that with these two, the particular ones, the sale of property and cannabis, that the council considers as part of their budget action tonight, including in the resolution language that ties those sales directly to the reduction of that debt on the general fund. In other words, this should not be
Back to the sewer fund.
Absolutely. This should not be considered free money to use for other things. The whole point of it is to reduce that number, the debt that the general fund has to sewer fund, and zero those things out.
So my question I want to get to on that, those two together, I agree to that we do earmark it if we ever do sell those and make that kind of money on the cannabis, back to the sewer fund to pay that debt down. What I don't like is making the assumption that we're going to make 1.2 million this year, because if we totally botched the whole thing and we are short 1.2 million based on our 14.3 million revenue, then now we're in a deficit
excellent
right out of the
point.
chute.
Here's two things. One, what we believe at this case with the number of properties that are currently available for the city to liquidate, there is an excess of that amount of money. This is a conservative estimate based on the current things that are out there. There are appraisals that are ongoing, and I believe, in full disclosure, there were a couple of properties that were either in escrow that have now fallen out of escrow. Those properties were
Below market?
I'm just going to say that the city could have made a better deal, and the city's in a position to make a better deal now. And I think that's something to consider. So that 1 million, we believe, is a conservative and realistic estimate based on the value of the property, the market at this time, and we also believe that there are multiple combinations of these sales that might happen.
My big fear is the tow yard. First was $2 million, then it got put down to $1 million revenue. Then when I got on the council a year and a half ago, we agreed to 500,000, and then we ended up spending 60,000 negative on that.
Well, I would encourage the council to take these items individually, because we're going to discuss tow yard in a minute. I can tell you that with the budget as it's proposed tonight, with these different departments. We should look at each of those departments individually and take comment. As far as those two items, the cannabis licenses and the real estate, I feel confident that those are realistic numbers. I also, though, want to mention something that the attorney's office also said, and this is again true. Cannabis has some potential for license fees, but should not be considered a panacea for all things in the future for the city. Those fees may be a one-time only, because as more cities adopt resolutions to engage in this behavior or engage in those licenses, that's going to make the value of the licenses go down.
Yeah, and that's my fear, is that, that when we get these one-time revenues, that we've always, the past habit of the city has always been to live on those one-time revenues as income, and it never comes true because it's only a one-time shot.
Exactly why staff's recommendation is, in this case, for those two things, those should be exclusively to retire that debt. And then if we're fortunate to sell more things or the licenses continue, then it'll be at the pleasure of council to assign those future revenues to something else as you see fit.
Okay, and then those cannabis estimate for the revenues, after they pay their own way with staff through the department over here that's handling all the revenue, or the cannabis, the attorney's office, the city manager, that's on top of all that?
Correct. So as an example, community development has some fees, and the legal department has some fees against that in terms of establishing the ordinances, and also in terms of entitlements that are required for either growth or future sale. And I'm not saying either of those things are happening, I'm just putting it out there. Those fees would be covered first, but when we look at the overall budget, that's included in. So we've allocated for those fees as part of the overall budget, and this as a money coming in. So with that $1.8 million that is surplus, and again, I'm quoting that because it's, again, it is not mad money. No one's going to Disneyland on that today. We have to figure out how to get that other debt figured out first. But if these things happen and if they exceed, then again, you'll have an opportunity to allocate those funds as you see fit.
Thank you. Thank you,
Mr. Vineyard.
Yeah, and just to tag onto that, the easiest way to do that would be not to put a figure on that motion, simply to say that the sale of the real property and the cannabis fees would go to pay the debt down, and after that time, it would be, the money could be reallocated later, without putting a specific figure on it.
I would absolutely suggest that would be the language on the resolution as you move forward with that.
That would tie us. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, if you have more of a presentation?
We do.
Okay, let's go through that and hold our questions.
Sorry, the top portion kind of got cut off, I believe. So this is for the tow yard analysis. So far, we have projected revenue for the tow yard alone was $50,000, and actual year-to-date is $70,318. For the expenditures side, we projected $45,000, but actual year-to-date is $46,449. That is including operating cost plus overhead. So year-to-date, we do have a profit of $23,869.
Probably want to take that in context, though, for the when we get to the whether or not we keep that or lose that. The question is whether or not we make more money franchising that out with a franchise fee, or whether we make money keeping it as is. So I would suggest, for purpose of discussion, that we continue the presentation, that we can take these individually if that's good with council. Moving along. Okay, so there are a number of things that contributed to the reduction of cost and also increase in revenue. Many of these came out of the March council workshop when we discussed these. One is police department restructuring. So as it sits right now in this budget, 1 sergeant position has been frozen, and 4 officer positions that were vacant will remain vacant for this year. Next slide. With CAL FIRE, we are reducing 1 battalion chief and removing the half-time battalion chief. As a reminder, the battalion chief was added in the 2015-2016 budget, so clearly the city was able to operate safely prior to that, and the half position hasn't been utilized to full capacity. Now that half position, just so you know, may have opportunities for things like fire inspections and whatnot that we do generate revenue off of. What we would look for CAL FIRE is, if we need to do that, we would have individuals that may or may not be incurring overtime, but for the limited amount of money that would have them doing that, it's a much cheaper option than having somebody doing that at a half-time basis we're not really utilizing. So we still have an opportunity for a cost recovery on that, but we don't have to bear that whole burden. At such time that revenues increase, then we would look future about re-implementing those particular positions. Next slide. As it comes to general services, and again, this is the Community Development Department overall, so that's building, planning, engineering, the whole 9 yards here. All of these things, we do have a couple of moves. One, we're suggesting the budget that we have one individual that will be a manager, building official that would oversee not only building, but also the contract staff that is now in place for planning, community development, plan check, engineering, and whatnot. You do need to have somebody on staff that is monitoring that, and as you recall from our discussion on Monday night, it's now going to be incumbent upon that department to track their hours per applicant for many of these larger projects to make sure that we're actually recouping those costs. So somebody has to monitor that and make sure that happens. This will also include eliminating the senior planner and civil engineering staff members. Biggest reason for that, frankly, is the fluctuation in the way that people access those services. The city of Atwater does not have a need for full-time staff in those areas. So this allows us to continue to serve the community, to process applications in an expedient manner, but not be encumbered with that full-time staff overhead that really does eat up a lot of cost. We'll be adding an administrative assistant that will be coming from the Parks Department to help facilitate all of this. Part of that role will also be tracking the hours. And then we have a code enforcement officer, and then again, continuing to use contract services. As a reminder, that was part of our Monday night discussion. All those services will be at full recovery plus a 20% administrative cost for things that relate to the processing of applications. But those things that are done for the business of the city, which right now may be including entitlements for cannabis and or real estate, those would still be tracked and then hopefully recoverable either on future impact fees or future fees that come forward. Next slide. Community services recreation, had extensive talks with Sandy about this. We've reduced the overall budget substantially to $364,000. We've also, though, increased costs for providing services for out-of-town residents, and then across the board increase for user fees and facility fees. This will eliminate the full-time administrative assistant position, which, as I just mentioned, will go to community development. But there's also a larger reliance here on automation, so that applications or sign-ups will be done online. And I think our plan is to come back to council probably in 2 to 3 months with a revised organizational plan for recreation, because we do believe that there are some options there, again, for further refinements, and also, frankly, for tracking costs. One of the things that has not happened at this point, but will be happening in the next fiscal year, is the ability to track the cost of providing a service per program. Like, you'll know what flag football cost and how many people participated and what the end result was in terms of the balance there. And the idea here is that when we see programs that are not successful, we consider not doing those programs anymore. And we find programs that are very successful, we consider ways to enhance them or expand upon them so they're more profitable. Another area here that they'll be looking at is increased utilization of services, specifically the community community center and the veterans facility, because currently those two places are both underutilized and frankly could be revenue generators for the city if they were positioned that way. So we'll be working on that plan moving forward, but again, this does increase profitability in this. It's still going to be a loser for the year, but it's also one of those things that Parks and Recreation is a integral part of the fabric of the community and quality of life. So we feel that at this point it's doable, it works within our budget, and we would encourage council to adhere to that. Next slide. When we look at lighting and landscape, again, you've already looked at this, but they're balancing out now. So we have landscaping and lighting districts that are fully funded. So that with the most recent study that was completed by Wildan in the fall of 2017, these rates would now be charged. I think there was a concern among council previously. Still needs to be adopted. There's a concern among council about some areas that perhaps were being charged for services but not seeing the services delivered. So one of the issues here that I would also say in terms of your resolution would be someone noting that once the budget is adopted and this is approved, that those services are provided. And as I think as legal would also say, you cannot charge residents for a service and not provide a service. That's something that they frown on in Sacramento and other places, so we would like to make sure that that also happens. Next slide. So when we look at general fund by department, I'm going to have LaQuinder kind of go over the basic on that, and then I'll backfill where needed. But just so we have some idea here, has everyone in council had an opportunity to look at these overall budget numbers prior to today? Okay, good. So that should make it go relatively quickly then.
So first we would be starting with the mayor and city council department. For that, that department, we have overall expenditure budget is for $14,885,000.
That's a substantial reduction for One Voice that we're not going to be attending. However, I would also say that One Voice is one of the legislative platforms that is pushed in the Central Valley. There are opportunities for us to leverage relationships with the county and others that are going, so it's not necessarily like Atwater isn't represented. It just means that we need to express our views to others and perhaps let them advocate for us.
Next would be the city administration department. So overall expenditures for that department is $826,000. That does include 5 positions in this department, so that's why the budget has been increased a lot comparing to last year.
LaQuinder, I'm sorry, Kendall, if I might, going back is during like city administration that we're at right now and all that, if there's a question at the end of all that.
Okay.
Now bring it. Yeah.
I'll bring. Okay.
So in city administration, I think you're all well aware. Well, let me back up. Did anyone have a question about the mayor council budget? No?
I just had one, let's see here, on Veterans Park, there's a notation here for bricks. I know what those are, the memorial bricks on there. What is the significance of that being here?
So basically we budget this money over here, but then we have 500 same amount in the revenue side, so it would be a wash.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
It's not additional expense to the city.
Okay, and you know, we have budgeted here also for the city-county dinner, $750 and all that. You know, just as a suggestion, you can budget this in, I don't care. But the thing that I would encourage, that if we are going to participate in that, that we perhaps maybe volunteer to pay our own way on that as well.
Okay.
It's a small token, but
Correct.
Just a thought. Thanks.
Okay.
Well, and frankly, with all those things, the point well taken, Mr. Mayor, that, you know, if these things come up, remember a budget is, if anybody does a budget at home, it's what you start out with at the beginning.
Right.
You pray you got it right. But there's always opportunities that you may decide that you want to take your funds as an individual and say, I would prefer it to go to this or the other, and you have every opportunity to do that.
Got it.
So as I mentioned, for the city admin department, the overall expenditures are $826,000. So if you have any question on that department, please feel free.
And just as a side on that one, as a reminder, the city is set up right now for, or previously was set up for 2 deputy city managers, and then we have an interim city manager, and we may or may not have another city manager. So there's a lot of flexibility in this particular budget. And this, again, is one of those areas that a number of these positions have been moved from other positions. So finance no longer has LaQuinder, and community development no longer has Ms. Waterman. So they've moved from one category to another. It's not necessarily as big of a jump as it looks on this particular page. It's simply a reassignment with some increases for additional services.
Yeah, the one thing that I would only ask on that is, what is the increase for the deputy?
From the previous?
Right.
Do you?
It was about 15%.
What's the dollar amount?
Do you know the dollar amount on that, roughly? If you don't, I do.
I want to say about $15,000 to $20,000.
Yeah, that's conservative, but yeah, somewhere in that.
And then you also have other things. I'd like to also point out as well, I think that Ms. Waterman mentioned, and I think I did too, as we move forward through the year, we're going to come back to council with assessments of each department. That will include finance, HR, and frankly also the city administration. And there will be future opportunities for the council to review structure and make changes. So when we're talking about the action today, we're talking about the overall budget. That does not preclude you from making changes down the road in terms of how things are laid out. For now, this is what we're looking at based on the staffing levels that we currently have. Should that staffing change, or you make a decision to reorganize, you would be able to revisit that and then make changes on that later.
I don't understand the vacant 5.
And also, I would like to point out that one of the vacant deputy city manager, a position is only budgeted for 5 months, since Ms. Waterman has a contract until end of January, so her position is only budgeted for 5 more months.
Okay. The only other question I had on here also was pertaining to the copier lease. And I don't know who can answer this one, but when it comes to this copier leasing, is that for an individual copier? Is that for several copiers? How does that work? Maybe Gina, you know better on this.
The one that's in this budget is for the big machine that's outside of the city manager's office and the finance director, deputy city manager's office. It's that one machine.
Okay, so you have that one machine there. You have another machine down the hall.
And there, it's funded in different departments. So like when we get to the non-departmental, that'll be the main big copier.
Okay, well, just food for thought on this particular one right here. I mean, it's a walk down the hall.
We also use it for a printer.
Okay.
It's not just a copier, it's a printer.
Okay, so that's my point, is if one machine can function as both right there, could we not do that and save something on the lease? Just something when we get to that point, maybe we can talk about. Mr. Vineyard.
Just looking at the operational analyst, I mean, we're leaving that blank. Couldn't we utilize those funds elsewhere? I mean,
Actually, if I can comment on that, that right now is vacant position, but it's going to be filled. We are asking it to be funded because we do need a position in that department at that.
and what's that department do?
That will be assisting the deputy city manager, the city manager, assisting in grants, any analyst. It's an analyst position, so anything that we need review on or things like that, that's going to be assisting.
And that person could also assist with the RFPs for all the other departments as well.
Anything operationally.
What step is that? Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4?
It's through.
It's step 4.
But you could hire somebody at step 1.
Possibly, yes.
Okay. But you got it budgeted up to a step 4.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Was that your question, Paul?
No, back on what you were saying.
Mhm.
The mayor pointed out the $4,500 copier lease, and then again and again and again through the budget, $4,500, $1,500. I mean, we could almost buy a machine and copy stuff for that, or it just, the $4,500 a year lease for that one, then you keep going through here, there's other leases for copy machines. It just seems like we're paying top dollar for our leases, and I agree with Jim that that's a big, it adds up to 20 grand at the end
I
of the
think
deal.
if Gina can elaborate more on it, but I know that it also includes service, maintenance,
supplies.
toner, yes.
Yeah,
that's
so
not-
what we will do, right now, the cost that's in there does include any maintenance. Anytime we have somebody come out to maintain the machine or supplies, it's all inclusive.
So all the ink's included in it?
Yeah, and we will be looking at, when the lease ends, we will probably be going out for another RFP.
'Cause aren't there's printers in most offices too, right?
Not everywhere, but yes, we have
Where-
some small ones in other places. We have some big, like a bigger one in finance,
Like we have one in
Public Works,
finance,
community
big one,
center.
but
Well,
there's
community
one.
center's too far away to not have their own.
Correct.
Right.
Right, but in
Public Works.
like for in finance, we have 7 people using that big printer. Then
Like
we,
Public Works has a big one like we have at the city manager's office.
Right.
Same thing.
Yes.
Public Works could get by with a smaller one and then just email everything to this printer down here and pick it up when they pick the mail up. I mean, that's like,
Printer, not just a copier.
right, that's what
Yeah,
I'm saying though. that-
they're also fax machines as well.
right, it's combination
It's
of all
a
those.
multi-purpose, but I think if
Yes.
I'm not mistaken, the lease is we're currently engaged in the lease right now.
Yes.
So at the time the lease is up,
We'll
then it
review-
would make sense for council to give direction on either the purchase of new equipment with a maintenance fee attached to it, but the budget line that is in here covers the lease that we're in now.
Yes,
So,
For this entire fiscal year, January?
it's fiscal year.
And I think that at one time, council and staff reviewed and went with this versus individual printers in each department as a cost savings to the city. Because it used to be everybody had their own printers and we had
Well, I mean,
different
email
copies,
and
but
stuff
now we
like-
don't have.
Like the mayor was saying, it's just a big expense that.
Yeah,
What-
and again, the thrust of my question here is also, as you're pointing out, I mean, how many things are, you know, this type stuff that could be done on a standard copier or printer, okay? And then the other part of it that isn't here, but I know it'll be buried in here somewhere, is overages. Because when you get into, you know, getting into the overages, that's an extra added cost on top of all of the other stuff. So,
Yeah, it's right below the next
right,
line.
yeah. So, I mean, it's just, it's $4,000 here, and then it's however much there, and that type of thing, pretty
if I
soon.
may, Mr. Mayor, it might make
Yeah.
sense to request staff at a future meeting, because again, these are costs that are already in.
Got it.
As we're looking forward for cost savings for IT, which is, in my mind, these are all kind of interconnected.
Right.
So if we're looking at information technology, computers, cell phones, all those different things, we could do an assessment on that at that time
Okay.
and find out where there are cost savings opportunities. Because, I mean, as an example, which we're not even there yet, but if at some time planning and building move from over there into here, you know, that is another different type of savings that could possibly be incorporated into that. So I would encourage council to give direction to staff to come back with that as a future item,
Okay.
as opposed to debating it today.
Okay. Ms. Vieira?
Yeah, I'm kind of lost under salaries and wages. So we have our city manager interim. That's pretty self-explanatory. Deputy city manager, finance director. Then we have deputy city manager vacant 5 months. I don't understand what that means.
So at the time that the previous city manager was in place, he appointed 2 deputies, and at the point that he left and then Lori became city manager, her position as a deputy, which had already been created, was still there. So at this point, because it's still there, there is a 5-month window if at such time that another individual comes in and is the city manager, then theoretically Lori would move back to that deputy city manager for 5 months. That's what LaQuinda was saying before. So she would spend the last 5 months of this fiscal year in that position, unless the council did something to either reorganize that department or change the way those are allocated, which would be at your pleasure. But for the purposes of budgeting, we're budgeting for the city manager, interim city manager, and the 2 deputy positions that were created in April?
March.
In March. So that's why it is the way it is at this point. And that's another, as I mentioned previously, that's another area where we can come back, or we can, obviously discuss it today, but this is based on the current allocation of staff as it currently exists today, moving forward through the end of the year. There's absolutely nothing to prevent council from reviewing or revisiting that organization at a later date, should you choose to do so.
If I might, with that as well, when we had those positions of assistant created, the 2 of them, there was, it was presented as a $65,000 expenditure. Get out of here. In any case, that was only up to the fiscal year. So when you add in that as a full year, that's pretty significant. That's a 6-figure up in our budget. So.
I think that was the difference between our current salaries and if we were appointed
That's correct.
as the deputies.
Yes, that is exactly my point, is that it was at that time an overage, out of the budget type expenditure. So I just want us to keep that and bear that in mind. Mr. Vineyard?
Yeah, and tagging on to this, yeah, we can change this later. And I'm going to throw that audit thing in there again. They're going to come and look at that and go, you got a vacant position for 5 months. Why don't we just move that now, move it to reserve, the budget amendment, we can move it back later, but I'd prefer not showing it vacant and having those dollars stick there and have it stick out as a sore thumb myself. I mean, to me, I'm looking at it and go, I mean, that's February to July, basically. But why do we want to have a red flag sticking out there? And that's how I'm looking at it, just
I don't think
as
that's-
doing an audit myself, I'm just looking at, you got $50,000, $51,000 savings.
bad
Why aren't we
idea
putting that in
at
a
all.
reserve?
If you move that to reserve, I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
And that's how I'm looking at it. So, and then the same thing with the administrative floater, but I'm not sure if you're going to fill that. Okay, but that's kind of how I would like looking at it, is eliminate that vacant. We've already been chastised for vacant interim. Let's just put that somewhere where it shows that we're trying to make more of a savings.
If we hire the operations analyst, do we still need the floater if it's vacant now? You do still need that if you have a full-time analyst?
Yes, because the floater is actually, because we're cutting all departments, we have no admin support, so that floater is actually going to be covering, for instance, community services in there. If now Sandy is a one-time person over there, or one person there, if she's gone or on vacation, sick, that person will cover over there. Same thing with Public Works. It'll also assist with the filing and the databasing of agreements and things that we need on an administrative support level that we haven't been able to do. And I think that's going to be the best use of that position, is by making it a floater. Whichever department is in need of that person, they can cover that department at that time.
I just think we need to get rid of those terms as soon as possible, even because somebody sees this, they're going to see those vacant. And if they're not filled right now, we're planning on filling them, just get rid of those terms.
Yes, we can do that.
Do we need to, what do we want to do about the 5 months vacant, the other deputy city manager for not utilizing that right now? Do we want to go ahead and remove that?
Take it out and move it to the reserve is maybe my preference.
Okay, I agree.
If I can comment also, so the 5 month is actually, instead of 50, it's going to be 115 if you add the benefits and everything to that. So.
Yeah.
Nice.
Get rid of it.
Thank you.
So I'll remove that.
Thank you.
Remove.
Move, not remove, move.
Okay,
Look at you.
any other questions?
Okay, next slide. Finance.
Go ahead.
That's your department. I'm going to think you're going to probably
Okay. For finance, we do have overall budget of $646,000.
Moving the whole year.
LaQuinder, can you go, I need to go back one page, back
Sure.
to city administration.
Uh-huh.
We have League of Cities and new members for a total of 5,045. In the previous years, we had 100 to 150. Why is it such a large increase?
Yes, please.
In previous years, we did not have a city manager or a city admin budget because that position was vacant. So we had dual roles in them, so most of the operating expenses were in the various other departments.
So basically, this moved to where it was supposed to be in the first place, where it wasn't before.
Yeah, and
Where was that before?
So if you look at the previous years, you'll see that there was nothing in there. So when we had the dual position of community development director and interim city manager, there was nothing in there for them because they either didn't go, and then even when it was a police chief and police chief and city manager, they didn't go to these conferences. So now we have a designated city manager position in the admin budget, whereas before we did not.
I would also like to point out, just a side, although I think some conferences are all about the dinners and whatnot. That being said, especially with League of Cities, and especially as it pertains to the City Managers Conference, the last several conferences had several very valuable presentations on legislative fixes for PERS and other things from the state. So there really is some very good value in both council and staff attending those meetings to actually get the latest information, because there's a number of issues, even when we look at rail and ACE, that are also at those things that are specifically pertaining to the city of Atwater. So I wouldn't look at those as a fun trip as much as it is actually some really good information moving forward.
No, I agree. When we go to League of Cities, most cities has their city manager there to represent them. What I was just questioning is the large increase, but it makes sense that It's just been moved, not
Yep.
increased, so I understand that.
Great.
So for finance department, our
Hold on just a minute.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, LaQuinder. Ms.
That's
Green?
Just want to clarify back what Mr. Vineyard was talking about so that I'm on the same page. The 50,918 for 5 months, is it from now till February? It's from February,
it's through February through June of next year,
For 2019.
2019, yes.
so with that position, if we were to hire a different city manager, where would,
You'd have to make a decision about whether or not you will, well, there's two scenarios. If you retain Lori as the city manager moving forward, then there would be a decision about whether or not you would have a second deputy position, the need for one. If you recruit and hire a different city manager, then the question is whether Lori moves back to the deputy city manager position. But at that time, the council would have the ability to determine how you want to organize your staff and how you want that to work. If you do move Lori back, then you would have to move the money from your reserve back into that position. But I think as Vice Mayor Vineyard said, in the meantime, from an audit standpoint, which I agree with, someone would look at that and see, right now it's a set aside in reserve, and then you would make that determination later about how you want to allocate staffing at that time.
but by that not being in there doesn't mean that if she's not selected as city manager, she's out of a job.
That's at the pleasure of council. I mean, you would have that choice. I mean, basically, I mean, I'm not privy to your contract, Lori, but
She
Yeah.
falls back on her
she falls
deputies.
back to city manager, so there you go.
So you can take it out if
No,
she falls,
she would go back to her
Deputy city
deputy city manager
managers.
position.
so you can't take it out.
It would have to be
Be
refunded.
refunded.
Okay,
You would just do a budget amendment at that time if
And move
that's
it
what
back.
happened.
Right.
I just don't want to,
Yes,
uncertainties are not comfortable, so, okay,
contractual.
Yes, she's contractually, okay, yeah, good, okay.
thank you.
Finance. Overall, the budget for finance is $646,000. The one change we are making in this department is, of course, I moved out from this department to city admin's department. I am proposing to add a finance operations manager. Since I moved, I don't even have a supervisor in my department, so since I am kind of taking a dual role on my job as a deputy city manager and finance director, I do need an assistant for management for my staff. So we are proposing that position. It will be a promotion rather than creating a new position. We are eliminating or combining accountant 2 position with that, so that way it's not additional cost to the city. Then the other change we are making is I am making one account clerk 1 from part-time to full-time. And other than that, all the expenditures are pretty much status quo.
Mr. Vineyard?
Yeah, I just want to clarify something, because in the paperwork I was reading, LaQuinta, it talks about the finance operation manager works for the finance director, but then lower in it says they answer to the city manager, so I just want to make sure
They're consistent, sorry.
that it's consistent. So
Okay.
just clarifying, they will answer to you,
Right.
so we just need to make that change in that paperwork so
Sorry,
there's no
it probably
confusion.
got missed.
No, that's okay. Like I said, one-word sentences I catch really good. No, it's not red line. Thank you.
Ms. Viera?
So I know that we've moved you out, but there's an overall budget increase of $230,000 from last year. And
So what happened was, used to be accountant 2 position was budgeted under water fund, just because majority of that person's time was allocated to utilities. So even though my department has increased, but it does get allocated to all the enterprise funds as well, because we do cover utility payments. So when you look at the revenue side under admin allocations, we do bring in that money from enterprise funds.
you want to go? Okay, then the retirement went from $16,000 to $110,000.
So a reason for that, you will see that increase across the board for all the departments. So we had to change our methodology, how we were allocating our retirement expenditure. We do make a prepayment in July to CalPERS. So used to be, we were budgeting this expense based on the tier system. Say, if somebody is a classic member, of course that cost would be more than a non-classic member. So this year we made that change, since we in miscellaneous group we have few classic members. So once they kind of come out of the system, but their liability still stays with the city. So rather than allocating their cost based on the tier system or according to their plan, we are basically doing it based on the payroll across the board. So there was a change in methodology. That's why you're seeing that huge increase.
Okay, Mr. Vineyard.
Yeah, the professional services, that's those are all a pretty drastic increase as well, and that's just the cost of doing business, correct? Community services went up, everything went up.
Correct. So for, I mean, these are pretty consistent. It's just all the contracts we have in place, we have to comply with those.
Yeah. And the same. And what about risk management charges? Those pretty much doubled.
Correct.
Yeah.
We had a retro for risk management.
That just includes the budget that we receive from the Risk Management Authority, and it gets spread across by payroll too. So if your payroll goes up, so does everything else.
Okay.
Mr. Crane.
So back on the retirement from 16,000 to 110, that's in reflection to the $7 million unfunded liability that we have. So now we're accounting for it in the proper category instead of making the $500,000 a year payment or the $250 quarter every half year. So
that
now
was,
this is all built in.
That would be under OPEB charges. This is just for the retirement, since the CalPERS brought their discount rate from 7.25 to 7%.
So where's the OPEB at in the salaries and retirements?
OPEB is basically being allocated under non-departmental. It's a separate line item. You will see it under.
That's coming up.
Coming up, yes.
Okay. So the 110,000, almost $100,000 increase is
That's
just on
for
the discount point of 0.5% from CalPERS?
Portion of it. I wouldn't say entirely, but different levels of allocations as well.
I think that it's a more accurate reflection of what it's actually costing the city, which perhaps was not addressed in previous budgets.
Right.
Thank you.
And we'll see that in every single line item of retirement, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
LaQuinder, can you go back over on the finance operation manager? So currently, that is not a new position. Currently, it's an account clerk too.
It would be accountant too.
So currently, it is an accountant too,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be a promotion to finance operation. What is the increase between accountant two and finance operation manager?
Do you know of that?
So it's a $10,000 increase?
Approximately.
And then the other, the clerk one, the accounting tech, clerk two, clerk one, those all just remain the same?
Correct.
None of those are promotions or increases?
No, so the only one is increasing hours from, oh, sorry. The account clerk 3 I'm changing it to accounting technician. That would be, I want to say $2 increase or about 6% increase overall in the salary. So that person currently I have, she's working under account clerk 3 position, but her job description falls under accounting technician more. So that's why we would recommend that change.
And it's how much? What is that?
About 6%, so $3,000. It's like $2 per hour. About a $3,000 increase, I would say, a year.
That can't be $2 or $3,000 a year.
Mr. Raymond?
I just want to know, is there a way we can get these numbers broke down in front of us as well, instead of trying to remember off the top of our heads and write down?
Okay, we can do that.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next would be human resources. It would be city clerk / human resources. We are moving city clerk functions to human resources department back. So overall budget for that department is $486,000. The one change we are making in that department is we are combining deputy city clerk position with human resources analyst position. This position used to be human resources assistant. Now it would be combined and with the deputy city clerk's position. So I think that was the only change in this department.
Well, and then of course we have the election costs are in here that don't show up every year, only every other year.
Correct.
Mr. Raymond?
What's the increase to the salary for that position?
If you look at Exhibit C, we have the changes to the structure, and although we thought most of them had that, the deputy city, I think, clerk does have that on there.
So on here, it's got the expenditure at $49,820, but on Exhibit C, it's from $55,000 to $70,000.
Is that because it's allocated to the other funds?
I'm sorry. Oh yeah, here. Give me a minute. Sorry.
Thank you.
It's like few things I have to flip back and forth.
It's probably the furlough too, because the dollar amounts in this salary are the base salary minus the 10% as well. Let me see. I don't show that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Yes, if you look at if you can see on your packet where the salary schedule is there, it matches what's in Exhibit C, but what you see in the budget is the base salary minus the furlough.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Still lost.
This is helpful. Thank you.
And a clarification, I know we talked about it too, but this was discussed at a previous meeting. This was eliminating the deputy city clerk position in whole and combining it with another position in an effort to save, I think it was like $61,000.
More with benefits.
Anything else on this?
Next would be our city treasurer's department. It is pretty consistent. Overall budget for that is $2,845. Next would be non-departmental. Non-departmental is basically covering all the expenditures which apply to all citywide. And this department does get allocated to basically across the board for all other enterprise funds and other major funds which fall under these services. So overall budget for that department is 1.5 million. This one does include that OPEB charges we were mentioning earlier. So as you can see, the OPEB charges are $555,504. This is for the whole general fund. Any questions on this department?
Yeah, but I'll let Mr. Raymond go first.
Just real quick on the OPEB charges. Is this still just making the minimum payment, or are we actually starting to pay a little more?
We are making minimum payment, but we adopted the resolution to start 115 trust fund with the $50,000 towards a reserve. So
okay,
that
so we're actually putting money into that trust now.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, if this budget gets adopted, then we will.
Okay.
But the line item in there is the pay-as-you-go portion
Okay.
of it.
Mr. Green.
I'll withdraw.
Okay. On the, where am I here? Financial solvency. If you have 50 grand earmarked on there, how is that going to be spent? Where, all that?
So currently we have a contract with RGS for financial solvency plan, which is task-based. The whole amount was $75,000, but we're assuming that the whole project won't be done in this current fiscal year, so that's why we are projecting $50,000 going forward.
Okay. Printing and advertising. Do we do, I mean, what do we do? And the thing about that is, if we're not doing that in-house, is that something that we can put an RFP out?
That is actually, most of that is for our legal notices that we publish in the newspaper, like for our public hearings or ordinances that are required to be published.
Or any job openings we have.
Anything that has to be in the newspaper
Okay.
comes out of that fund.
So that coincides with where it says below that newspapers, that's all inclusive?
That's the detail. Yes.
Correct.
That's the detail.
Okay. And once again, the copier stuff is there, and I made a note of that as well.
Yes, and that would be the large machine that does everything.
Right. And in this one, let's see, the overage is in there, total of $2,300. Is that a pretty conservative estimate, or how does that factor?
It's based on our actuals from this year, so I just pretty much, if it looks pretty steady, I put the same, but you never know, because if we have big production, then it's gonna vary. It varies from quarter to quarter.
Okay. And lastly, what is the significance of being colored in blue down here towards the bottom where it has the equipment maintenance charges and what have you? It's
So these are all the formulas. So equipment charges, that's an internal fund. We have buildings and for equipment maintenance. So since we budget all that cost in one fund, but we allocate it across the whole city. So these are all allocations. So they're just blue just because these are formulas in there.
okay. I just didn't know why it was
Right.
color-coded another way there.
pretty.
Okay.
I just wanted to make it colorful.
Yeah, I'll bet you did. Okay, Mr. Vineyard.
The IT charges, IT technology, is that the phones, computers, the whole ball of wax?
Correct. So down the road, we have a separate fund for IT as well. So these are the costs being allocated based on how many end users we have, and basically all the IT cost is being allocated across the city as well.
Okay, and have we done any new, looking out and doing new IT RFPs or anything like that, or looked at new art?
Yes, and that's one of the areas we'll be coming back to council with at a future meeting, assessing the actual needs of the entire city and taking a look at how we could be more efficient. I think that also goes to Councilman Creighton's discussion about looking at copiers, all those different things to figure out are we getting the best bang for the buck.
Okay, thank you.
Next.
Moving on.
So next we have is the police admin side. Overall charges for, budgeted expenditures for that is 1.8 million. And under admin side, we have all the dispatch expenditures and, of course, the police admin side alone. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
And there's still ongoing discussion, just as a point, about dispatch in general, but that has not been resolved at the time of preparation of the budget. So it's highly likely that we'll be coming back to you at some point down the road with an update on the opportunities for consolidating dispatch services with the county. Okay.
Question?
Any questions?
Sir, go ahead.
The parking citations. We've talked about it up here before about parking enforcement downtown. We have a couple of city lots and businesses downtown. We don't have any structure of, if you could just go down and park on Main Street and be there all day. So is there a potential somehow to, with this budget, work in some type of a parking enforcement program for PD, or is that just too costly to try to implement to capture those costs, because there's revenues we're not getting on those?
It's one of those things in general, I would have to defer to the chief on that, but in general, it's very expensive when you look at the different things that people are doing, and frankly, the police officers that are actually responding to calls are at a higher value, I would say, than using time for that. That being said, it's likely a good conversation to have with the chief and ask about whether or not...
Like during the organizational structure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on this?
I'm sorry, Mr. Raymond.
Well, just to piggyback on what Mr. Creighton said, wouldn't that be something like the CSO could do? That position isn't...
Currently, our CSO is being stretched in numerous directions right now. We've got him assigned to animal control services.
Okay.
We've got him assigned to assisting on the evidence side. So he's being utilized in a variety of different avenues, and there's just not enough of him to be able to stretch out. We have utilized or implemented the volunteers into that aspect as well. And again, we're limited on those individuals that can come out and assist us with that as well. And our officers are actively, time permitting, they will go ahead and issue those citations as time allows them to, and depending on the circumstances.
Thank you.
With respect to that CSO, and you were mentioning about animal control services and that type of thing, I know that we're extremely limited in what we can do as far as animal control. Would it be beneficial to possibly explore with the county about doing some type of a arrangement with them, because they have much better services than we do? Is there any thought to that, or has there been?
It's my understanding that's been looked at in the past, and the issue with that as well is we'd end up having to go into some sort of contractual agreement with them as well. So in regards to whether or not that would be a cost-saving measure or not, because they are also limited as far as their officer that's out and available. We have in the past, when needed, have called on their services to come into the city to assist them, but they're also on some sort of constraints as well.
Yeah, I'm just curious if we can do it on a call when needed type basis or something along those lines.
They can. They are. We have to go through a command kind of notification with them. So we can make the request, but it's up to the duty supervisor at that point, or the watch commander, to make that decision whether or not they will call that individual out to come in and assist us. So primarily what ends up happening is we have an officer that's actually taken off the street to handle that situation. If we cannot get the CSO to come in after hours, or assistance from the county animal control officer. We've looked at the possibility of utilizing the volunteers in that aspect as well, somewhere down the line.
Okay. This one.
Part of our restructuring is also identifying that, and we have a subcommittee that's looking into that with the county as far as maybe partnershiping or other avenues through the animal control. But that is something we are currently working.
Right. Yeah. What you're referring to is what myself and Ms. Vieira were tasked to do. And this is kind of a separate thing from there, only because I recall we had one situation where we had property out here that had some animals on it that needed to be removed, and they were violent and all that. We don't have anything more than like a snare and that kind of thing like that. You know, they have like sedation type equipment and that type of stuff, and they're more extensively trained. So that was my only concern with respect to that. Let's see, who was first? We'll go with Mr. Creighton first.
So we could do that back during the organizational review, what the mayor's talking about and what city manager's talking about, that potentially there could be some savings instead of having PD have to deal with that and the tranquilizers and all the apparatuses that go with that, that maybe we could potentially contract those services out at the same time. So do we need to do a special footnote for that, or we just include that in the operational restructuring working?
I think you.
Yeah, I believe we can go ahead and just add that on there.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Raymond?
My question is for the city manager. So on here, we still have it budgeted for the $88,000 for the year for the rims, but I know that you guys were looking at trying to get out of that contract. Because, I mean, the way I see it right now is we're looking at freezing 4 police officer positions, a sergeant position, and yet we're spending $88,000 a year on a convenience. You know, that money might be better allocated to help fill a position. So have we gotten anywhere on that?
So agreed, but that is a contracted amount that's already been agreed to. So I believe Chief has been looking, as well as our Deputy City Manager, been looking and see whether or not we can get out of the agreement that's already been signed, regardless if we can get out of it. And again, we're looking at what we do in the dispatch unit itself will depend on whether or not we should or shouldn't get out of that contract anyway. But if we do, there will still be a cost associated with getting out of the contract. So we may have a fee that we're going to have to pay. We just won't have to pay the full amount going forward if we do. But I think if there's, I don't know if Chief or Deputy City Manager.
At this point, we are waiting on our attorney. They are in negotiations with them. So it could be that just to get out from that contract, it could cost us more than $88,000. So just because we do not have a final answer on that, so I felt like I should include that payment in here just to be on the safe side.
Right. Okay.
Isn't there a drop dead date that we have to make a decision on that, and isn't that just in a few days?
We already issued them a termination letter and stuff, but of course, it's at a point where they're saying if you want to terminate this contract, you have to pay all our invested cost, which could be up to $110,000.
I spoke with their attorney while he was traveling in South Dakota the other day, and we're trying to work something out.
Mr. Vineyard?
I'll remove my question. This is similar to Mr. Raymond's.
Okay. Mr. Creighton, did you?
This is for the attorney. Clarification on the $88,000 and then our buyout. That would be a transitioning out. It wouldn't be a waste of money if we terminated the agreement. It'd be the notice and then we terminate down to a drop dead date. It's not just a penalty fee. We would use it till there's a clause in the contract that that additional fee that we're obligated to. We can't just write them the last $88,000 check. They'd say 2 months or whatever on top of that. Because it sounds like you're saying if we terminate the contract, we have to write a big check and we get nothing for that. If we do terminate it, we finish the service out like a 90-day agreement.
It's all kind of a package, like LaQuinter talked about the other costs.
It is for 8 years lease, yes.
So
we
if
can save millions of dollars by, okay, I just want to point that out because it sounds like we're being foolish with the money.
Right.
And we're trying to be frugal and save millions, not spend thousands.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Mr. Vineyard.
Yeah, I do want to recommend it. It'll probably come later up, but I was just kind of throwing it past the city manager. In the past, we've had garage sales applications, and they've actually charged for garage sales. And then for some reason, they went away from it. Partly, I think it was the workload and the hassle. But the volunteers used to actually go out and do the inspections. If the people had garage sales, we'd check, make sure they had the proper application. If they didn't, we'd offer it to them, and we'd collect the money and bring it back, just to make sure they had all the paperwork and everything else. And for some reason, we went away from charging it, and then we went away from garage sales altogether. And those things have increased exponentially since then, to where people do it every weekend, and it's become a business for a lot of people. I personally think the city could collect some money with it. To me, they make more money on a weekend than a lot of them. Some of them, it's just every 1 weekend a month, 1 weekend a year. But if you charge like a $10 fee for an application, we could issue them the application, give them all the paperwork, where they could put the signs, where they couldn't, where they have to take them down, etc. And if they want to do it for 1 weekend, it's $10. If they want to do it for 4 weekends, it's $40. If they want to do it for all years, it's $520. They pay their fee. The city makes some money. Volunteers can still go out and do the inspections, but we have to have some follow-up mechanism for the violators. And we can eliminate a lot of problems in this city in that respect. But it's a way, it's revenue. It's not really a tax because people are going to make money. And you have a lot of people that go out and buy new stuff, go to yard sales, and bring it back in this city. Winton Way, there's a house on Winton Way where every weekend I see trucks, different trucks come in. And it's not that one person, but they're providing their property, and they're selling all kinds of stuff. Some of it's brand new, some of it's used. And to me, it's just a way to reduce some of that and kind of eliminate some of those businesses, or at least if they want to make money, at least have the city make some money off of that procedure too. So it's something I think we can look at to help bring in some revenue for the police department.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that one residence on Winton Way. I've seen it out there. Who has a yard sale that a panel truck comes in and starts dumping stuff out there? That's not a yard sale, that's a business. So I hope we can approach that one. Ms. Waterman?
The garage sale issue, as far as a business as well, has been an ongoing issue with the CDRC Commission, so we can definitely put that on an agenda. We can discuss that. It'll be a matter of amending our ordinance for the violations, and that's been our concern in the past, is having the manpower or what have you for identifying and collecting the, from the violations. But with the volunteers, I think we can work something out, and we can put that on going forward.
The volunteers are chomping at the bit to do more things for the city. I guarantee it. They would be happy to do this. So
cool. Okay.
Moving on to police field operations. Their overall budget is $3.6 million, which includes, is it 4? 4 freezing. We are freezing 4 unfunded positions in that department.
It's 1 sergeant position and 4
For
sworn.
officers.
Yep.
Those are ones that are currently empty right now, so they
Correct.
are currently empty. We're not laying anybody off.
No.
Right.
Where in the police or where in the budget is the volunteer program?
Usually the cost to run that department is part of the admin side, but it's not broken out separately.
So when you say usually, there's a record of that somewhere, or?
I mean, if the volunteers needs uniforms and stuff, it's included under admin side of the police.
The volunteers actually pay for their own uniforms
Oh, they do,
and every
okay.
weather. So you'd have a fuel cost, a vehicle maintenance cost. It'd be about the only thing you really have. We wash our own uniforms, we take care of everything else ourselves. So unless there were some time in the past that the chiefs had bought us a couple of uniforms, a couple of shirts each, other than that, and it's pretty much strictly on us, on the volunteers. So other than the vehicle maintenance and fuel.
We're also supplementing some of our surplus equipment that we can go ahead and we have turned over to the volunteers as well. So it's equipment that is still serviceable that we can go ahead and continue to use.
Mr. Raymond?
So if we're looking at freezing 4 positions, how many positions are open or vacant now that can be filled?
Can't be filled?
Can be filled.
Oh, can be.
Because I know we just lost an officer.
We can, if somebody left us, we can fill that position up, but these were only positions which were unfilled and unfunded.
So basically, the way it sits right now in the police department would be status quo is full staffing?
Correct.
Oh, we just lost an officer,
Correct.
last week?
We will backfill that one, yes.
Right, and as a matter of fact, he'll be sworn in tomorrow.
What's the shift running right now, body-wise?
I'm sorry?
What's the shift running body-wise right now?
Currently, we're running with 3 patrolmen and a supervisor. That's a 12-hour shift, so we have 2 squads that we're currently running. Right now, because the school session is out, we are utilizing school resource officers to augment those patrol shifts. We had to utilize one of those positions to backfill that vacant position so that we're not incurring any overtime. So we're trying to utilize as many of the officers right now to offset any vacations or time off requests and continue to minimize any overtime.
So how does that work with the school resource officers? When school is out, they're paid obviously year-round, so then they just work regular patrol during that time out?
They're not paid during the time that they are by the school during school session being out. So they have the option, just like anybody else, to take some time off. So we try and afford that as it's needed. However, right now they're continuing to work their 5/8 schedule, so to speak. So they're maintaining that schedule. We've supplanted them into both ends of the week so that we have those 2 officers assigned, or 2 extra officers assigned to each shift, and they overlap between those the fixed 12-hour shifts.
Go ahead, Frank.
Mayor, if I can get Gina, she's been working on the CSO negotiations, and if she can comment on that. They're going to be doing an analysis and come back with a recommendation on that, but maybe you can comment on that?
Are you talking about the SRO program?
SRO, yeah.
Is that what you're talking about, SRO? Oh, so, yeah, no, every year, or most every year, we just meet with the schools and we negotiate our new contract, and we're just doing everything that we can do to make sure we are doing cost recovery for everything that's allowable. In fact, this coming year, the Atwater Elementary School District is assisting in purchasing a new vehicle for the SRO program at the elementary school site.
And the match for that vehicle is provided from Major H.
Which is 50% of the total cost.
Okay.
Anything else? For the fire department, their major expense is basically their contract with CAL FIRE, which is about $3 million. So we are proposing to freeze one battalion chief position, which is $210,000. Then another half position for $105,000. And we are budgeting $250,000 under Measure H of this contract. So overall, their operating budget is $2.6 million.
Mr. Freeman?
Now, one of those positions that we're looking at freezing there, don't we split the cost with the county?
Not specifically for these. The half we have, half is covered by the county, half is covered by the city.
But by freezing these positions, isn't the county going to have to pick up
Correct.
the extra cost for us?
Correct. So we do have to negotiate with the county.
Okay, so the county hasn't agreed to it yet?
Negotiations are pending. Justin can speak
Yeah,
on
I can
that.
clear that up for you. So out of those 1.5 positions, the city of Atwater pays for one whole position, and then the half a position is split between Merced County and Atwater City. So it's a half-funded position. So to give up that half a position would have to be that Merced County assumes that whole position. So part of the contract was 2.5 BCs. So we're covering the other half of that week with battalion coverage and shortage and overtime for vacation. So that position was filled, split between sharing Merced County and Atwater City.
So what happens then if, worst case scenario, county says pound sand, we're not going to eat this cost?
Without getting too far into it, I did have a conversation with representatives at the county. I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm just curious on, there's nothing here to say what, unless I missed it somewhere down the line here, but for the ladder truck and what the balance is?
Oh, the ladder truck is covered under Measure H.
Okay.
Enterprise.
And the contract's already included in the 2.5 positions, so it includes your 9 paid staff firefighters at both stations. And then the 2 positions was operations, which I assume the operations role. The other full position was your fire marshal, which acts as the fire marshal for the city and also coverage for the end of the week of the city. So he works an admin schedule. I work a 24-hour schedule, so we have a gap of shift that opens up. So that's where the half came in and picked up those extra days of vacancy from the county. So the budget price of $3 million is like we talked about when we did the contract agreement. That's a not to exceed price. So this fiscal year, we look at coming back to this last fiscal year, we're 2.7. We're estimated as saving $176,000. That was it. That was going to be included in the last year's contract. So the money that doesn't exceed that is back into the county or the city for those contract services. So the half a position, the 1.5 position would require a letter to change and alter the contract for the fire service.
Okay. Mr. Vineyard.
And with all due respect, your captains are trained to do command and control, correct? So are your engineers, but your captains especially.
Yeah, everybody that comes out of the COA is trained to an acceptable ICS position.
So essentially, especially as of last year and this year is now starting off similar to last year throughout the state, should you be gone and most of Merced battalion chiefs gone, CAL FIRE puts a captain in the position to fill behind you for a short term. Or if you're on your days off and the captain's filling in, the captain takes over those duties. And I understand CAL FIRE's position now is is if they're in there for a certain amount of time, they have to pay them your wages.
No.
Okay. Well, that's what was relayed to me.
Okay, that's not true.
But, and I know that if they're in there for a year, that's maybe the case. However, there are numerous fire captains who do fire marshal's jobs. So, you know, if we want that job, and I'm not taking anything away from Mark, because Mark is more than qualified to do the fire marshal job as well, but we don't need to have that as that position. We can still have the command and control with a fire captain if we should want that. It gives you an extra staffing as well.
You do lose that battalion coverage on the end of the week, so
I understand
agree that the possibility of the half is a good cost savings for the city and the need.
Understand that the captain can work a 3-day work just as well as you can, so we do cover 6 days of the week.
You utilize the captain for coverage, for battalion coverage?
That's what I'm saying. That would be a command decision by CAL FIRE,
right,
not by us. We're looking at him as a fire marshal.
He could be a fire marshal, but he could be part of the fire marshal program, but he could not on a normal day assume battalion chief responsibility and coverage for operational needs within the city.
Other than the fact that if there's a fire and you're out of the city, he could respond to that fire and take command until
correct during the drawdown situation.
A higher up responds or is here. Yeah. Correct.
So no battalion chief would be available. You could utilize a captain to fill those roles for a day or a 2-day shift
or longer. Correct. Yeah. And that's my thinking. At the same time, that still gives us what we're looking at as a fire marshal. Should we still want to stay that route? Let me see if I can gather where I was going with this. But I'm also looking at higher up administratively. You're the one that's here all the time.
Yes.
You're the one that deals with our issues all the time. I don't see here where we pay for the division chief.
That's
about a 20%.
Yeah.
Correct?
That was included in the contract agreement, the fiscal breakdown of the 20%.
Yes, I understand that.
So it's all-inclusive contract agreement of the 3
and it's with here too, but that's also a salary savings to us, because to me, I don't feel we're getting the benefit of that 20%, even though he may help you, but you're the one that always seems to be doing the work for us.
Right.
Which is because you are responsible to us. So why are we paying a 20% for, in my opinion, someone who doesn't respond to us in a direct way as you do? So I'm just looking at a savings there from the council side. My responsibility is you are directly responsible to us. I have no problem with your paying your wages, but because I'm not getting that response from your higher up, right. I don't feel I should be paying that much of that wage. And I understand he helps you a lot, but I don't see that as production here.
Right, and
I'm just voicing that to the council more than you, but that to me is another way of saving a minute portion of the salary. So.
Okay. Is there anything else? Okay. Let's see.
Next.
How about let's go through community development, and anybody here need a break or want a break? Okay, let's go through community development, and we'll take about a 10-minute recess after that.
Okay. So for community development, their overall budget is $932,000. The major change we have is we are combining a position of we are making a general services manager / chief building official, combining that position. Basically that's one change. And also, like we mentioned earlier, we are moving admin assistant 1 position from recreation to buildings. And also for code enforcement position is coming out from PD's budget to buildings as well.
Can I ask a quick question on moving the code enforcement officer from PD over to community development? The authority or the powers that that person will have, do they change from coming over from PD? In other words, will they be able to, still cite for violations and all that kind of thing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so
No operational changes.
Okay,
just
so
location.
it's strictly just a move from
Logistics.
one funding mechanism
To
to another.
another one, yes.
Mr. Vineyard.
Okay, maybe it's a minor point, maybe it's not. You're talking about community development department, and then you're talking about changing it to general services department. So the acronym or the name change, reasoning behind it, or just?
Yes,
I know
we
you
will
talked
update
about
that.
it kind of here, and I didn't catch all the conversation, but just kind of give me a reasoning behind that.
We will change that from community development to general services.
Why? I mean, I'm just trying to.
I'll take that
Why?
one.
Why the change? Just kind of.
Because in part of the reorganization process or the restructuring, that department now encompasses other, we have contracted contractors that are handling, we used to have planning, engineering, employees. Now we have contract benefits, and so that department or that division now handles the contracts for those professional services. So it's encompassing other areas where it it didn't only include building, planning, engineering. Now, I don't have my structure in front of me, but it also includes other, I think at one time it may still include Parks and Recreation, Community Services, trying to think of,
Yeah.
do you have the?
Well, just that we actually changed the department name back in March when we added the General Services Director. So this is just finishing the name of the department.
So because it's more generalized?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, so bigger and more realistically represents, okay. And I'm trying to it was just like trying to wrap it around and combine it all and get it thinking. Okay.
Okay, anything else with community development? General services? Whatever.
Wrap it.
It's going to take some time.
Okay. All right. Okay, if there's no other questions as it comes down to community development or wherever we're calling it these days, let's go ahead and break for about 10 minutes or so. Come back. Well, let's come back at 3 o'clock. How's that?
Okay. break it?
I think it's, yeah, no,
That didn't sound good.
made a big old pop.
Division,
Candy's up.
whatever. Okay, let's forge ahead here.
Okay.
Can I, before we start that one, LaQuinder, can I just, and align with the previous one for community development where we have that as a general services development? This is also General Services Department Recreation Division.
Okay. Now that we have that clarification, go for it.
So for this department, the first change we have is in personnel, which is the admin assistant one position is being moved from here to General Services Department. Overall budget for this department is $351,000. And we did review all the programs mentioned under this fund.
Well,
we did review some on the revenue side as well as Kendall mentioned earlier.
I think the thing that was challenging, and challenging not only for staff, but also in the construction of the budget, previously, funds for each of the different areas, the programs, and even for staff, when you look at, they were not separated out. So for this fiscal year, we're proposing that we set it up in such a way so that Sandy can actually track by program the costs and the fees that were paid for that. So at the end of the year, and perhaps even on a quarterly basis, we can look and see which programs are actually functioning on a profitable level and which ones are not. And then she's going to be better equipped to make real good decisions or recommendations to council of what to keep and what to not keep.
Okay.
Overall, the budget was cut by $120,000. That's also offset, as we mentioned on Monday night, by an increase on user fees and an increase on participation fees and a specific increase for participation fees for non-residents. So those things combined, and along with the more stringent accounting system, we believe will set Parks and Recreation on a better path to be more able to judge what's working and what's not, and better suited to provide council with actual numbers so you can make decisions about what kind of things you'd like to see funded in the future and how you'd like to see the department move forward.
Along with the online registration.
Yep.
I was curious on the, I made a note here about the aquatic program, because I know we talked about all the other football, baseball, whatever, those fees there. So I was just curious if this was included into that
Yes.
redo of the fee structure. Okay.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
And again, I think that, though, based on the information that we had, and frankly, Cindy did a great job of trying to, construct information for us to put that together. When we review the master fee schedule for the 2019-2020 budget, we're going to be in a much better place to determine the cost of services, again, what's being utilized, what's not, and how to better adjust those to make it work. I think the other thing that's important in this particular budget is also recognizing that there is a opportunity to better utilize the community center and better utilize the facilities therein, which could be a revenue generator. So there's things that we can do that are very cost effective that Sandy's prepared to do to bring more people in, which again will help increase the budget. I think the other thing that's important on this budget, which we will see in the next fiscal year, if you look at the line item that is for what I would say casual employees at $100,000, we're going to be able to separate that out by the referees versus the maintenance people versus whatever, and then be able to look and see where those people are spending their time and their hours. Any questions on Park and Recreation? We move to Public Works, which is park operations.
Parks operations, so not any significant changes, it's basically status quo. Their overall projected budget is $121,000.
I think this is another area that I believe the city manager may have mentioned previously. we'd be looking for cost efficiencies at a future date to figure out if there are other ways of providing this service that would be more efficient and more cost effective in order to increase the level of service that is being provided. And perhaps, Laura, you want to?
And align with that, some of these things we are ongoing now, and we have started the process because a lot of them involve either contracts or negotiating or partnershiping. They're an ongoing and couldn't be completed by the budget process. So they are, as Kendall said, ongoing.
Well, this is just park operations. Okay. I got it.
Yeah, Mr. Vineyard.
Yeah, I just wanted, under restroom repairs and parks, are we looking into, because some of those bathrooms are just atrocious, are we looking at long range into replacement, repair, upgrade on those things?
Like Lori mentioned earlier, we do have a parks fund, but we have to see where we collect impact fees on specifically for the parks maintenance and projects. So if there is any available funds, we can look into that project as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions pertaining to parks? Yeah, Mr. Raymond.
For the Bloss home, we entered into an agreement with the Historical Society, yet we're having a $4,000 increase in expenditures over there.
I had a question on that one as well. I know that the utilities unfortunately weren't included in that agreement, so I believe we're still responsible for the utilities, but I'm not sure about the other 3 line items.
And that's still a $1,200 increase.
Last year, the projected expenditures are $77.50. This year is $77.
But LaQuinda, remember we signed a contract,
Right.
they took over.
I'm sorry, I forgot about that. So I'll relook at the professional services and communications as well. But the utilities, they stay.
Okay, and then we have to take into consideration that we get no proceeds from that anymore. So that's all a net loss.
Correct.
It would be my suggestion at a later date when we do visit. I know we approved it for a certain length of time, and we went back and forth. I don't know if it was 3 years or 1 year, but the utilities, once, I believe they'll be making revenue because they've started renting it out and such. So I think when we revisit that, I think that would be a line item that should be included in that.
Okay, so it was a 3-year agreement, so we're going to eat that cost for the next 3 years.
Maybe we can open it up. Maybe there'll be money to open it up.
Anything else? Next would be our miscellaneous items. These are basically reserves we are setting aside for general fund, which is $100,000. We are doing OPEB obligations and pension obligations, $50,000 for each. We do have a shortfall in maintenance districts, which will be a transfer from general fund since the fees staff brought towards to the city council for approval. They were not approved. They were denied at that time. So due to that, some of the districts have shortfall in there, so that money has to be transferred from the general fund. Then we do have a obligation for general benefit contribution to maintenance districts according to our engineering report, which is about $50,000. So these are just few miscellaneous items.
I have a question on that, though, and clarification. On the maintenance district shortfall, that item's going to come back before council for approval?
On the 7/23rd.
And they would have an opportunity to retroactively collect those fees for that period of time?
I'm not sure at this point.
We'll want to know that, because the option with that would be looking backwards. You might be able to replace that $149,000 from general fund with the fees that were collected from the ratepayers, right?
Right.
So that's an area where that money, if it does come back in, would also represent another $125,000 that would be to the good, I would say.
Right.
It could be allocated also for general fund reserves or OPEB paydowns.
Okay, Mr. Vineyard.
Thank you. Yeah, because somewhere down the line, we have 52, 54 lighting, landscaping districts.
Yes.
And we have a lot of areas in this city that don't have lighting and landscaping districts, and hopefully somewhere in the line we'll get those that are in the negative out of the negative, because I would like to see a citywide lighting district and a citywide landscaping district so that it's spread out everywhere, and because taking money out of the general fund to make up the difference to me is kind of robbing everybody. But I think everybody needs to share that cost throughout the city, and it's everybody gets the same.
Right.
Because I'm hearing, downtown, well, we pay taxes, but we're not getting anybody to clean our plots, and it's like, okay, but there's no landscaping district down here, so there's no funds for it. So I think we need to try to work towards that, so that we have it citywide, and then maybe that'll help with our employment and everything else. But I think it's just something we need to work towards.
One of the challenges with that, Vice Mayor, is that you have to make sure that within the maintenance district that the fee that is paid by the property owner is fair to that property owner. So as an example, when you do a citywide, different people in different neighborhoods have different benefits, and you can only pay to what your benefit is. But that being said, one of the things you might look at in the future is consolidating districts that have similar character. So instead of having 52 with 11 in arrears, you might find yourself with 5 that are balanced. So that would require another study, but just to be clear, the existing districts would have to be financially solvent and in good order before you start consolidating or do anything else. So something to keep in mind.
It's somewhere we need to work towards it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Mr. Raymond?
So you'd mentioned retroactively going after the fees to collect them. Would there be a problem, though, if that service still wasn't provided in the meantime while trying to go back and collect for something that wasn't done or was minimally done and
you
still
can't charge a fee for a service you didn't perform. That being said, not all services are provided every single month. So provided that in the year that you have the service in there, like let's say that you say to somebody, if the fee was for last fiscal year and no service was provided, you could not go back and charge the people for a service you did not give them. However, if a service was provided and the person was not charged for that service, you could go back in that. It may be different per district, so I'd have to look at the overall and then talk to Public Works about what they did. But overall, if you had something that came up and perhaps it was in the calendar year as opposed to the fiscal year, provided you made it right and you paid and you did that service, you could in fact collect that fee. You just have to make sure that you're in the calendar or in the window year of when that service was provided or what promised to be provided.
And to add to that, there are some fixed costs, like for lighting districts, we have to pay to the PG&E because the lights were on there. And same thing for when there is a storm drainage cleanup or anything like that. Those services are like, we don't have a choice, we have to provide those services. So that's kind of like a fixed cost. So that was not collected either.
Mr. Green.
So, to comment on top of that, I think what Councilman Raymond's talking about, some of those districts, there's no landscape maintenance done on it. However, I do know that you guys do the storm drain stuff every rainy season and throughout the year, and the lights are always maintained through the entire year. But what I've been pushing for since I've been up here is to contract out the landscaping of those districts so that you don't run into what Councilman Raymond's saying. Did it get done or did it not get done? A lot of municipalities go to that. When you have an engineer's report that says we have this fixed cost to do landscaping, cost X, the city needs X for administration, what's below that, we contract out. How do we get to that? Because we're always told we'll do that next year or next time, and we're here, this is next time right now. So how do we move in that direction?
Well, one, you have to have a better understanding about what the specific deliverables are for each district and an expectation that's realistic.
Right, like the acreage, right. the type of mowing, deletion of mowing,
right.
Stuff like that. So how do we do that?
You'd have to go in for each district, and that'd be my suggestion, and delineate out what the specific service that was going to be provided at a minimum, and then talk about the things that could be done over and above that. And many times, like in a couple of the ones we're working on, putting the landscaping in may be the thing that the district does, but the maintenance, not. I mean, there's some very different ways of doing it, but each one is going to be different with a different set of criteria. So you'd have to take the time to go through and look, and that's what I'm saying. When you look forward to the possibility of consolidation, you want to look at similar neighborhoods with similar types and say, okay, for this neighborhood, it's going to be response for storm drains, it's going to be lighting, X number of lights that are operational, 365 days a year, and it's going to be X times of landscaping or landscape maintenance, whether that's quarterly or monthly or weekly or whatever it is, but you've got to, put that in writing and say what it's going to be and cost it out so you know that you're collecting enough money to deliver that service.
Okay, we don't have the staff, and we don't have the staff time to do that. With these landscape districts, under 218, we could hire professional services to come in and do that for us.
Absolutely.
So the city manager could hire somebody to get that to where we're educated, to where we could say, okay, let's go out to bid, and then this is all we have for these districts. District A, we have $20,000 a year to mow the parks for the whole year for that area.
Absolutely, and you can also, I think someone mentioned, the downtown areas. Many downtowns take a different approach where they form a business improvement district, which is different than a lighting and landscape district.
Like pressure washing and
pressure
trash
washing.
pickup.
Also could have, wayfinding, signage, parking lots, amenities like benches, and that would work normally through the city. And if you have a strong chamber, a strong group of merchants downtown, those are becoming increasingly popular. And they can be a business improvement district, the business improvement fund. There's different ways you can structure them, but they give maximum flexibility. And frankly, they also give the ratepayers the seat at the table to figure out how the allocations are going to be spent. In other words, if it's a business improvement district, the payers in that place are determining, here's their money, how they want to spend their money that year. So it's much more attractive to many folks in that instance because, shockingly, not everybody thinks that government gets it right. So sometimes they want to have control over their own money and decide how they're going to do it.
So within this maintenance districts, I see that we have 2 parks maintenance people allocated to that. If we were to contract those out, we still have parks that are general fund parks, Osborne, Ralston, and the other parks. We still have to have somebody maintain those. So what do we do in that situation where we want to contract out the LMDs with the revenue we collect here, and then what do we do with the other parks? Because we're kind of funding those employees with both.
Good segue. Those lighting and landscape districts, those are like an enterprise fund, so you're supposed to deliver the service based on what you get paid, right? So parks and recreation, like the actual Veterans Park or the community center, if you separated those out, Public Works would take those over. And then, if I was to make a recommendation, I would say that when you figure out what your 218 compliance is for your lighting and landscape districts, you attach the cost of contracting all of those services out, and then you capture that fund with a small amount on top to allocate for the administration, because the city will still have to do that whether you have somebody or not. But that would be a cleaner way of doing it, and also it wouldn't tax your staff resources, because already with such a small department and 52 landscape districts, it's an untenable situation. So I think looking at that and figuring out if there's a better way to do it, where you have the person that's going to deliver the service with the RFP, figuring out what's going to cost to do it, and then you build your 218 outreach from that so that they know what they're getting.
So the question to LaQuinder is, the engineer reports, is there any money left over after we allocated the park maintenance people in those funds to take some administrative money to hire a professional to help us?
So what happens is, like, all the districts don't have a shortfall. Some of them has money. But what we do is we budget all these expenditures under one fund, which is called a reserve fund. Then we allocate based on the needs, where the people were working or where that money was spent, like say for lightning, basically for the street lights and stuff. So we will allocate that bill to
I'm focusing strictly on the
correct
park part.
So same thing for the professional services. We will have a contract with Wildan maybe. Then whatever cost will be, that will be allocated to all those 52 districts based on their size.
Okay.
So here's a suggestion. This is just a suggestion. But we talked about a little earlier, that $124 million that we taking from general fund to repay the
$124,000,
right? The shortfall, right? If you didn't allocate that back into general fund, let's say it gets paid back from the maintenance fees, if you took a portion of that, issued your RFP, and then figured out, how you wanted to go about getting the RFP for the delivery of services, it wouldn't affect the overall budget, and you would still get a better product at the end without having to go into reserves.
Okay.
And that's on the overall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my question on this here, because Paul's kind of going what I'm thinking here, but LaQuinda, you mentioned the areas where there would be a shortfall.
Right.
Okay, so that's, when you say a shortfall, that's a shortfall for the cost of what we would do it, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm just curious if we could pattern some kind of an RFP where those areas are shortfall and maybe expand it later, but at least in those areas where it's a shortfall. Because I know I've been being beat up by Kingsview, for example,
Right.
For wanting to, talk to the city
Right.
about contracting. Yeah, so if they came in and in those areas that are shortfall, it may be a place to at least begin.
Right.
And
So, I mean, at this point, we were thinking about maybe limiting their services so that we only do provide minimum services, so that way we are not creating that shortfall bigger.
Right, and to me, it's kind of an idea of testing the capabilities and, how good of a product they would, provide,
Correct.
that type of thing. And if it works out, maybe make a provision in there where we could go with an expanded service. Because I know we've all talked about it, but the money and the people aren't there, and when it comes to the parks and, just, cutting the lawn, we've tried going down this thing about adopting parks and all this kind of stuff, and it works for maybe a month or something like that, and then it falls apart. So if we're able to go down an RFP that can, cover, plus the benefit of that, it'd be 5 days a week rather than be restricted to a furlough 4.
Right.
So just
Okay.
something to continue to look at, I think.
We will do some research on this, then get
Okay,
back
great.
to council.
Ms. Raymond.
I just wanted to say I agree with the mayor there. We've tried to go down this road and approved an RFP process that never even got off the ground. It's refreshing to hear that, so thank you.
I don't think we've ever forgotten about it. It's just a matter of getting it together and implementing it, and
I just want to
Time
comment
is right.
on, like you mentioned, Kingsview. We have spoken with them. There has been some discussion, and they were supposed to give us a proposal as well.
Okay.
But we
because
need to
didn't
make sure we open it
follow
up
the
fairly.
process. Exactly.
Not just
Exactly.
give it to a good old boy.
No.
And if we do something like that, would it be out of line to just have a cost or a dollar amount specific to work within and say, hey, $100,000, what are you going to do for us, that kind of thing?
It
Or-
will come to the city council. Even to issue a RFP, we will need your approval to do that. Then,
Okay.
of course, we will accept proposals, then we will select which one is most cost-effective for the city.
Yep.
Then
But I think what
the
mayor's
whole
saying-
process.
What you're saying is with that
Stay within a
professional
number.
staff will try.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they'll say,
Projects do
all right,
that
for this district, you
Yeah,
got.
yeah,
$100,000.
yeah.
So
Yep, yep, yep.
we'll do that.
What can you do for that amount of money?
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, forging ahead.
So that concludes
So-
all of the general fund expenditures. The next section, I think LaQuinda had already gone through these at the previous meeting, but these are all the various, enterprise funds and things that are allocated in a different way, right? So all of these have a revenue stream and an expense stream, and they don't mix. And I also want to put on just put it out there that LaQuinda worked really hard on getting these straightened out and moving some things around, but there were some lines that were a little blurred, let's just say, in the past. We took a look at these as well as just one of my colleagues, Mark Moses, and after looking and reviewing it, everything, just found this to be a much more solid budget.
So, like Kendall mentioned,
Mental.
majority of the funds we already went over, so would you like to revisit those, or?
Okay, probably just, let's go back to page 1 and start going down. Any
So we are at
concerns?
page 56 right now.
Okay.
Expense seems to line up with the revenue, so that kind of zeroes this page out.
Okay, so are we taking off?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Let me look at that.
What page are we on now? 56 we looked through?
56. Sorry, I don't have a presentation for that, but then we can go over each page.
Okay.
For page 56, we have general fund capital projects. As mentioned, the revenues are projected at 1.5 million, and majority of these projects are based on grants. So the projected expenditures are 1.5 million as well, because whatever grants funds we do get, we only spend that much money on all those projects. So if there is a change order or anything, that will come in front of the council for approval. Any question on number 56?
Also, where you have the Juniper pedestrian bike path infill, any of those right there where it says sidewalk or the bike path and all that, those are Measure V expenditures?
No, Measure V is separate.
It's
Well,
CMAC.
These are CMAC.
Oh, these are all under CMAC?
If you go to
Yes.
the top of that, Mayor?
Yeah, I see that, yeah. Okay,
Measure V you will see later.
okay, all right,
So our match, our local match is on.
got it.
Moving to page number 57.
Okay.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, well, okay. Well, Ms. Vieira's got her light on. She
Sorry.
gets to go first.
So every year it's going down, but we're proposing a $500,000 more in revenue this year versus what was actual for last year?
Correct. Because some of the projects they started last year, I mean, we only got the, say, engineering done, but the project construction will be starting in this year, so that's why we are projecting the expenditure or revenue would be higher.
Yeah, they don't fund the construction portion of it and the engineering portion at the same time. So if we have the project engineered and now we're ready to move forward to the construction portion,
I'm
that's
talking about the
when.
Measure H fund.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Like what?
You're ahead.
I'm so confused. We moved on to the next page. I know.
Okay.
So in 16-17, our revenue was 1.9, it went to 1.8, 1.4, but now we're estimating 1.9, which is a $500,000 over our actual for last year.
Correct. So these revenues are, projections comes from Muni Services. They are pretty consistent, and of course, they do fluctuate a little bit just because, based on the gas price, mainly.
I think that we're being overzealous by assuming we'll take another $500,000 in revenue when every single year it has decreased.
No, actually, the last year we budgeted at 1.8 million, so the difference is only $100,000.
I think the councilwoman's
I know,
looking
but
at
the actual was 1.4.
Keep in mind that sales tax revenue lags, right? So at the time of, even now, we're not going to see the sales tax revenue for the first 2 quarters of this year for another 3 or 4 months. So there'll be a writing, right? In other words, it takes more time for us to get it. We won't have the actuals for this
Okay,
fiscal
so
year until the
when
end of the year.
the reason I'm questioning that is it says actual as of 6/18, and I was thinking that's the actual for the end of the fiscal year, so I understand what you're saying. Okay, gotcha.
It's kind of mid-June. Okay, for the revenue side, we are projecting at 1.9. Then for the expenditure side, we are projecting our expenditures at 1.9 million. We do have a surplus of about $26,000. So as you can see, we are budgeting 6 officers under, full-time officers under Measure H. We are not making an interfund transfer going from Measure H to general fund anymore. That's why we had to move those personnel from general fund to Measure H to cover that cost. And is there any questions on
Yes,
this?
I have a question. So right now, we have 1, 2, 3, so we have 5 officers and a sergeant. So basically, if Measure H ended tomorrow, we will lose our department.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We have to figure out a way to get them back. Measure H needs to be for equipment and replacement, because there's no guarantee that Measure H is going to be renewed. So we've got to start weaning that off, because if we lost it tomorrow, we will not have a police department.
Agree.
Okay, so
Mr. Vineyard.
Just on the match for the body cameras, Chief, that's as of right now, if we got the body cameras, that could go up a little bit possibly? Or is that actually pretty consistent what it should be?
It's fairly consistent. There's a couple vendors that we've looked at in regards to the cost of the cameras. There are some fluctuating prices, but we've been very prudent as far as making sure that we're going to, if we're able to go through with this, that first off, we can finance it. It's also contingent upon the grant that we could potentially be awarded. So there's a couple variables that are that would allow us to either move forward or, at this point, at the minimum, get some data to be able to possibly, somewhere down the future, maybe look at that as well, too.
Wouldn't expect it to go up any more than maybe a couple of grand at the most.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Which we'd be able to cover. Thank you.
Correct.
Mr. Green.
So this is back to Laquinder. So Measure H, at the termination of its expiration date, we're balanced now. We weren't balanced before, so you were able to correct that deficiency?
For last year, we were spending it more than we were bringing in, but this year, that's not the case.
So
We are balanced,
from here
yes.
to the end of it,
Yes.
we're balanced?
Yes.
No deficit? Okay,
Yes.
that's what I want to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Page 59.
wait, real quick.
Sorry.
I know that someone mentioned earlier that the lease payments for the fire truck, where are they on here?
That would be 87,000. Towards the bottom, it says 2030, 3034 account. That is the rents and leases, that's the truck payment.
Very bottom.
Got it.
And the truck will be paid off when this measure expires, so.
What is the 200,000 for special department expenses? What is that?
That would be a match for, fire department is planning to buy a new engine. And we were planning to apply for a grant, but that grant is not available until next year, March. We are going to apply for that grant at that time, but fire department has a major need for a new engine because the other one is keep breaking down. So this would be basically, if we want to buy a new engine, that we can do 5 years lease. And to have that engine fitted and everything, that's why we are putting aside $200,000. The $144,000 would be the lease payment, and whatever left, $66,000, that can go towards the equipment and to get the engine all fitted.
And what about the professional services?
That would be the contract we have with CAL FIRE. So partial of that $3 million is being budgeted under Measure H.
So if we lose Measure H, we lose our fire department too?
Yes, partial.
Okay. So we'll have no police and no fire if we lose Measure H?
Because this fund was basically for public safety, so.
What do we have left on it? 4 years.
Any other questions on this fund? Moving on to page 59, this is the Ferrari Ranch project fund we have. This is basically reimbursed fund, so all the costs we have under this fund is being reimbursed. Any question on that? Moving on to page number 60, this is Measure V fund. We are projecting to bring in about $500,000 in revenue, and we are listing about 5-6 different projects under this fund. As you can see, our expenditures are higher than our revenue, but in last year we were projecting close to $500,000 in revenue, but we only spent $51,000 so far. So there is a fund balance available to be used. So that's why there is a $95,000 shortfall, but that can be covered with previous year's funds.
Is it possible to get some kind of a printout that says what all the fund balances are?
It was included in the budget in the front.
Okay, thank you.
And just as a side on this, and this is the same situation as the Measure H funds, so that Measure V funds follow anywhere between 4 to 6 months after the quarter, right? So that as monies come in, they're distributed down the road.
Perfect, thank you. I see it now, Laquinder, thank you.
You're welcome.
And the good part about the Measure V funds, and Kendall, you know this, we're running above all the expectations for
We're running
for all that.
15% at least above the projection at this point, and that's a really good thing.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, with respect to projects and all that, I mean, you know, projects on here are just a wish list of what we want to do, but we are definitely looking to possibly in the next year get to Winton Way and get that going. So that's a big step in the right direction. And Mr. Shaw and I had a discussion last night about, you know, getting some of this striping stuff done. So there's some ways to get around some of this. We were talking about some of the surplus equipment we have that just has never been used, and, you know, making that surplus and getting it sold so that we can maybe put that money towards other equipment. So a lot of creativity in there. Mr. Crane.
So these projects here, Measure V, on page 60, those are going to be spent when, and like on the Fruitland project, the 2 corners of Fruitland that are completely gone, the one behind Save Mart, there's a section there. Not looking to replace the whole street, but is this engineering cost, or is this actually fixing something?
Michael, can you address that?
Because there's one thing that people want right now more than anything is fill the potholes and fix the bad segments of the road, not the whole road, but the critical spots.
Yes, to answer your specific question, a portion of that is engineering and a portion of that is construction. Both are included in that number.
Like a simple grind and overlay in certain segments?
Unfortunately, no. It's more of a full reconstruction. The existing road is primarily a thin layer of asphalt over dirt. There's no proper road base there, so it requires a full reconstruction.
But just in those completely collapsed areas?
Yes.
Not the whole stretch?
Yes, it's very targeted,
Okay.
just the worst parts right now. And as we continue to accrue Measure V funds, we anticipate to do more of the road repair.
And then as the mayor said on Winton Way, we were talking about from Bellevue to Juniper doing the engineering this year.
The engineering for
Reconstruction of Winton Way from Bellevue to the post office.
Broadway
Right.
to Juniper.
It's from approximately Broadway to Bellevue on Winton Way is the engineering, which is nearly complete
Okay.
with the consultant. And that construction will be partially funded from Measure V as well, yes.
And when would the construction on that begin?
Construction on that is expected to begin in 18-19, probably in the spring.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And Michael, you and I have spoken about that very section, you know, on Fruitland there where it turns.
We have.
So a couple of areas of concern that I have with that is we put a patchwork on the one side right there because the road is so narrow, and when it rains and whatever it filled in, well, now there's a patch of asphalt or cold patch or something in there to go and kind of just Band-Aid it, if you will. And then the other section coming up where it turns into Fruitland right there. I won't take a car over that. That's bad, and for you guys that live there, I can't imagine. So, you know, all that engineering and stuff has already been done, but I agree with what Paul's talking about as far as, you know, just kind of we don't have to have the whole Bible, just a couple of verses is kind of what I'm looking at.
Yeah, agreed, and that's our approach. We're trying to take care of the worst pieces, which
Right.
You and Mr. Creighton just described first, yes.
Okay, well, I'm probably getting in the weeds on this one, but like the mayor's saying on that, I don't want to we don't want to make it for semi-trucks at 80,000 pounds, but previous councils have tried to put a small piece of connectivity from that neighborhood to the back of the shopping center, which should have been included with that shopping center when it came in. So Livingston put a small blacktop footpath, and since we own that property now where the storm basin is going to go, is there a way to do that when we're doing the construction there? You have the hot mix truck out, do a 5-foot walk path to the back of the shopping center.
That's something we can look into. We don't quite control the piece of property that's basically on yet.
Okay. Okay, so that may be multi-year. Okay, thank you.
There's some burning.
Okay, what else? Anything?
We
Okay.
smell on fire. Do you guys smell that?
What?
Fire?
Yes. A little smoky. The TV just burned out?
It did.
See the room back here. See the
haze.
Oh, my goodness, that smells.
We have in the budget for a new city hall.
It's electrical.
Oh.
Meeting adjourned.
I just put it in your way.
That's your heat.
That's what it kind of feels like.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It smells like someone just turned the
Okay.
heater on.
Right. That's your heat.
It just smells like the heater just turned on or something.
Because it went to 83.
Oh, Lord.
Replace that system. Mike's too.
Yep. Okay, TV's.
It
Well-
smells to me like it's the ductwork heat.
This room's good.
Like a circuit popped or something.
So we busted a breaker.
Like a circuit. Earn your keep, bud.
The TVs are coming back up.
Just push on it a little.
Hey, if it was anybody else, it wouldn't work, but because it's you.
Oh,
It does smell like the heater, huh?
Yeah.
It says it is, so it should.
Oh, here we go.
it's on.
Uh-huh. You're right by that vent. Hitting both vents.
No, the heater probably did kick on because it was at 83.
Good.
Come on, Mayor Pro Tim.
Yeah, it's that burning dust.
Hello.
Distraction.
Is it on?
Good work. Way to jump to action. It's not making chili, but it works.
AC back on?
Turn it on cool.
Okay.
Okay, let's,
Try to kick back and forth the heat.
We have 40 pages to go.
it's climately controlling. Okay, where's Paul?
Yeah, Jim.
Yo.
Well, this Jim. He'll think it's funnier. It's climate change.
Climate.
Get it?
Or global warming, whichever the acronym is for today.
Cindy, take away his drink.
That's strong. That's solid Diet Coke right there.
Where'd Paul
Not
run
even
off?
water.
I don't know. Yeah, it's on cool, so it should.
But it should have kicked on, but it hasn't.
I can hear it humming.
Measure V.
Yeah, but I can feel
It
heat.
hasn't.
I think your air conditioner
Every
went
time I
kaput.
smell that, I assume it's your computer.
Man, that's throwing heat. I can feel the heat.
That thing's gonna blow up.
Burning
one day.
daylight.
Can we put it in the budget to get you a new computer?
We'll have to change some of those funds to about 30,000 to the air conditioning now.
There you go.
Because
Not gonna have to, it's gonna have to glue it. I can get it to work. I have to glue it. Get some super glue.
Yes.
I can hear it, but that's about it.
Throwing heat, or is it?
It's hot in here.
It feels like heat. It's not.
Well, we're almost done.
Does it not work?
always does.
They're all enterprise funds. We can buy these.
Oh, yeah.
Not for all of them, only for water, there was a little bit.
Are we still trying to find out if we're on
nothing
fire?
crazy.
Can we move forward while Justin checks the fire?
Heater's
on?
Last time there was
AC
just
may be going.
basically
It's not sending any cool air out.
Yeah, I know. I'd like to get going myself.
Maybe we should come back tomorrow then. I
Perfectly
can't.
challenged.
Are we back?
Yeah, we're as good as we're gonna get.
All right.
Okay.
Let's go.
Back door.
The eyes are starting to gloss over.
Okay,
Well, there's yeah, okay.
61, 62.
okay.
Moving to page number 61. This is the Measure V 20% alternative fund. So we are projecting revenue of $125,000, and we are listing about 4 projects under this one. Then same scenario, we did collect $130,000 year to date under that fund. So we do have fund balance available to cover that cost. Any questions on this one?
So,
questions?
I have a comment.
Sure.
Instead of going line by line with the air conditioner being out, and these are the enterprise funds that we've all reviewed already, can we see if there's any specific comments so we can go faster that way?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
There's only one fund that has a change, and that was water, correct?
Yes. We
Okay.
can move to page, I mean, if you want to glance through these, that's fine, but.
Okay, yeah, if we're going to go push up towards water, the only question that I have, unless somebody else does, with respect to the wastewater, is I want to know if we have a updated contract with Castle for the wastewater coming out of Castle.
Not at the moment.
Okay, and, because this is something that was brought up almost 3 years ago, and we're still working off the JPA's contract, which expired.
Correct. So my issue is I'm not able to locate any prior data or discussions, so I'm doing some research on that.
Okay, whatever we need to do,
Correct.
we are woefully over on that, and we need to get legal and whoever, and possibly consult with Mr. Terpstra and ask him what information he may have or not have pertaining to that.
You might want to get Steve Pound at the wastewater plant involved, that he might be able to fast forward.
Well, I'm talking strictly about a contractual agreement right now with the county, which we don't have, apparently. So,
Okay.
Mr. Raymond.
So on the Neighborhood Stabilization Program Fund, since we have a revenue of $300 and expenditure of $213,000, was there a fund balance there, or?
Yes.
Okay.
What is the professional services on that?
Which page is that?
72?
I'll have to check on that because there is a comment, but I can't see that
Does it say
comment
the house on
here.
Schaefer?
I won't know it's an expense.
Right, but
Okay. I have a question too. I don't know.
So we're going to check on that for the neighborhood stabilization program?
Yes,
Okay.
72 page number.
that wasn't the house we sold on Schaefer, is it?
I want to say it is that, and of course, this would be the reimbursement to
For
the
us?
state.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
but I could be,
yeah.
sorry, I could be wrong, but I thought,
You get back to us on this.
right, I will.
I know, it's at the end of this. Yeah.
Okay, we went over the maintenance district. Okay, anything else, anybody?
No.
Okay, so do we want to go back to page 1 and start coming down and,
Moving to page number 80, underwater.
yeah.
So for, are we ready? We are projecting revenue of 4.8 million. This is based on the 10% rate increase we just went through on Monday. These projections are based on that adjustment included.
Okay, Mr. Raymond?
For total revenues, does that include our service agreement with Winton?
Winton is only for sewer, it's not for
sewer,
water.
okay.
So overall, we are projecting 5 million underwater for revenue. And we have all these expenditures.
Was there any changes for personnel? 3.9 million expenditures.
We moved one admin assistant. Sewer. So Public Works Director position was moved to sewer fund from here. And the executive assistant position was moved from here to sewer as well.
Did we have the project accounting for sewer?
So the net change for personnel underwater was -3.
Also, I'm noticing here, just kind of, I know last year when we did the budget, I had brought it up, and I know the mayor brought it up today, there's more underwater, more copy. So far, we're up to almost 30,000 in copy leases, and that just seems like a lot. I don't know, just something to look at.
Yep.
And we did add a new CIP project for the courtyard maintenance. We are splitting that cost between 3 enterprise funds, so $20,000 under each fund. So the overall expenditures for this fund is $3.9 million.
I know we should be bringing that closer to balanced. I know we made a lot of changes in our Park and Rec department. What page is our income on for our revenue on that? I mean, our expenditures, I'm sorry.
For Parks and Rec, that would be under general fund.
For our revenue?
Yes, no, I'm sorry, on the very front page for Parks and Rec, where they have the total fund balances, that would be,
Page 23. I mean, there's no revenue for the Parks and Rec, but we only have expenditures for Park and Rec under general fund, and that would be,
no, we have them in revenues. We have them in revenues.
We have to have revenue.
No, we have them, it's.
I just know you had made a lot of changes, and I know that we had put our expenditures at 351, but we had a lot of changes coming that we were anticipated for our income.
So you're talking about
recreation fees are,
recreation
fees
department.
are estimated at $174,000.
Where
That's
is-
on page 23.
Oh, I see, okay.
And it's line 4061, when you go down there on the left there. That includes, that all of the fees that are in the budget for this consideration are all based on the updated master fee schedule. So those have all been taken into consideration, and they've been compared and reviewed on past performance from the department.
Sorry, I was confused because I thought you were talking about parks, but recreations.
So you got your question answered?
It did it?
Cindy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
I just wanted to know, I knew that they had made some changes in the budget, so I just wanted to know where we were.
Okay.
I wasn't napping.
Moving on to page number 83, under Water Fund Capital Replacement, Fund number 6001. We are projecting only 5,000 in interest income. We do have a lot of fund balance under this fund specifically for all those projects. So we are projecting to have about 6 projects. So the total expenditures comes up to $875,000.
Quinder, on that, the expenditure side,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see professional services in there because Brian's going to need engineering and some stuff for the Department of Health to get that well online. Where do you have that at?
Brian, was it under enterprise fund? All the projects you have listed under water fund capital?
Oh, there I found it, LaQuinder. Lori pointed out it's on 84, 140,000.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I don't see, okay, yeah. Samples, repairs, rehab. You don't have the engineering or he's going to need help with the engineering and the Department of Health to do that.
We have engineering services budgeted under the enterprise funds under 6,000 fund, under professional services, because BBH will be providing those services.
6,000.
6,000, 70, 10, 30, 30
Got it,
on
right there,
page
9,
82.
okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Moving on to next fund, DBCP settlement. That fund, that settlement has been done, but we are projecting professional services for $140,000 under that, and we are projecting to install 500 meters next fiscal year based on our study. So that cost comes up to about $410,000, but we do have enough fund balance to cover those projects. Moving on to, sorry.
Can you go back to the meters?
Mm-hmm.
When you say we, does that mean Brian and his team?
I was referring to city, yes.
Okay, because most cities that are trying to play catch-up are hiring firms that come in to do that. Like you find the easy ones that aren't going to be a lot of water main repair, and you just put them to task in those neighborhoods that are simple for a fixed rate. Are we doing that, or do you?
Yeah, a lot of the upgrades we've done in the previous years, probably last 10 years, we've just done upgrade and put a meter set in there. So now when we buy these 500 meters, we can just go back, pull the idler out, put the meter in, program it, and it's good to go.
But could we, since we do have the money in this fund, could we allocate some additional funds for Brian to hire some part-timers or some full-timers to come in, whatever? I'd say a group of part-timers to do that type of labor for him, because you got to dig it out, you got to set the box, you got to connect the meter, and then you could have those people on task doing that for you.
That can be something looked at.
Can't we just contract that out?
Yeah, that's
so we
what I'm
don't
saying.
have any more. Well, you're saying part-timers, I'm like, we don't need any more.
We can have
contract it out.
We can have professional services.
So can you get with Luke Quinder on that and maybe talk to another city, and then we can put a increase in that, maybe put a placeholder for a couple $100,000?
Well, that'd be for another RFP, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it'd be like a meter replacement project.
So do I need to amend that now, Luke Quinder, or?
We will bring to the city council. If we have to issue a RFP, then of course we will have to follow the process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Moving on to Water Capital Impact Fees Fund. We are projecting revenue of almost $100,000. There's no expenditures. Moving on to page number 86, this is Wastewater Enterprise Fund. We are projecting a revenue of $8.5 million. This is based on the study that was presented on Monday with the 15% reduction in our sewer rates.
I'm sorry, LaQuinder, can we go back? I have the answer that Councilmember Beer was asking on the NSP, I believe. I'm not sure what page that was on.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. Neighborhood stabilization.
Yeah, NSP.
Yeah.
So the message that was in there, they were just able to send it to me. So return of unused funds to the state, including interest. So that's what has to go back to.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't do any projects. We were allocated those monies. Now we got to give them back.
Yes.
I was guessing for that, but I didn't want to say it.
Okay.
There are no other changes, right?
There was no changes made to sewer fund from last time. Would you still like to go ahead and review?
Mr. Rand?
Because water was the only other fund which has changes.
I just, same question, as the agreement with Winton is included in this?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do those ratepayers pay the same as?
No, theirs is basically, based on the agreement we have with them, they do pick up some of the portion of city's operating costs. So it's based on the consumption.
Okay.
They're at a higher rate.
Okay. That's what I wanted to make sure.
We do meet with them twice a year to do a true-up and for all the payments they make for the year, and of course to tell them how much their payment will be in the for the next fiscal year. So we do meet with them twice a year.
Okay, thank you.
So if there are no other changes to the fund, according to my notes, looking at the budget as a whole, the items that would be, the council has commented on is moving the city manager, the deputy city manager 5-month position to reserved, with the idea that perhaps later it would move back, along with the associated benefit that goes with that, including some language into the resolution that basically ties any future revenues from the real estate transactions and/or cannabis to pay down the sewer fund loan first. And there was one other one. I think that was it, actually.
That was it.
Yeah, those are the only pieces that I had.
So my suggestion would be when it comes to city administration, and I know that Art kind of was heading in a direction with this, and then when his tenure was cut short, I'm just not sure that right now, based on what the city's needs are, that we really have room for 2 of the deputy city managers. And I'm seeing also that moving one of those positions up and putting it as a dual role, it appears to me that we're kind of having to take everybody in that department and bump them up and giving them more roles. And it appears to me that that position is costing more than we had anticipated when we approved it. My suggestion in this department would be to continue with the interim city manager at this time, but revert back to where we were previous. It just seemed more like a more affordable option that we had. And I just don't see, when we're this tight on our budget, where we can continue to, I understand we're increasing duty, but with increased duty comes increased pay, and it's just, we're just too tight on this. Oops. Couple other things, like I said, and I know Mayor brought it up, I think I did make mention last year at the budget. I brought the copiers up. We were going to look at that. We're spending, again, over $30,000 a year in leases. So I think we need to look at those leases and see if that's something that would benefit from any kind of a buyout or
purchase.
Or purchase.
Could I interject something while you're on
Yes.
that too? How often do these break down? You know, I've had copiers in my office for years, and you just plug and go. I mean, are these, you know, very, are they maintenance pigs, so to speak, or what?
I can't really speak to the copiers and the other specific departments, but I know the main copier, we do have to have them come out. I don't know, what would you say, Kim? Because we have to have them fix the rollers, because it's pretty high production, or there's a line in there, so that it does require maintenance.
Well, I think what Cindy's driving at here, and I am too, is that if we owned something like that, what would be the cost difference if we had a problem like you're describing and have somebody come out to do a fix on something like that?
Yeah. I think we should do the analysis again, because I
Right.
think the reason we went to leasing is because of the technology changes all the time, and we didn't want to stay with a machine for a long period of time, because then the parts become obsolete. So with at least the lease program, they're swapping out the machine as we need them to do that too.
So,
Right.
I think Kendall touched on it earlier. We need to roll that into IT. We're getting ready to renew the lease on that. I agree that we're paying an exorbitant amount. However, the one that Kim's using all the time for agendas and other things, maybe it's cost effective to have that one leased, have the departments buy smaller units that are more dependable, like the mayor said, in his office, my office, I've got one that's 8 years old, it's still ticking, but the ink thing becomes an issue, but we need to readjust the whole citywide copier thing, because we're getting ready to move this building over here off the premises, move those people back to City Hall, so they have copiers over there too, and we're redundant. Then Recreation needs to have its own standalone like City Hall has. But Public Works could have a smaller version, because you come here to get water stuff and mail every day, so we don't need a big lease out there. But you guys can look at that.
Yes, we can look at that. We can do a citywide assessment of the tools that
Because I
we
just
have.
quickly did the math, and it was almost 50,000.
Cindy, did you have more to add?
Yeah, I forgot all about PD, so.
Yeah, let me find all my notes. I think it's important that we try to utilize, to bring down the cost, so that we can slowly begin to move our officers back out of Measure H. And just because, I mean, there is a chance. It's not going to, I mean, I'm hoping and praying that it is something when it sunsets, but we're still, even with the changes that we made in our Park and Recreation deposit, we're still at a net loss of about $177,000 a year. I'd like to see if there's any way to maybe cut anything more off of that. That's still quite a bit of a loss. If there's any way we can utilize some different, maybe the swag program or just different things. It's, again, like you said, it's not, and I've talked to Sandy and Link about this, it's hard to be very transparent with that because it hasn't been tracked, and I know that she's requested over the years to have more line items, so I'm glad to see that that's coming forth. But just kind of in the situation we're at, we're still, our expenditures and our income is still almost $200,000 spread there, and that's quite a chunk.
If I may, Councilwoman, I think that one of the things that we discussed internally is coming back to council, I'm going to say within like 90 days, probably the latest it would go, with some options for consideration, either on different delivery mechanisms, and at that point too, we'll have a much better idea about what actual costs are associated with it. I think that in the construction of the budget, this is what kind of applies to the copiers as well. you have before you a budget that's balanced that gets you to where you need to be. There's definitely places in every department where we see opportunities for future savings. So I think, as the city manager mentioned, this is just one step. We should not stop at that. We should continue on to come back and look at things. But I think that staff's going to need some time in order to make those assessments and give a really good background for you to be able to determine whether or not there need to be additional changes made or not. And if those changes are made and you save additional funds, all to the better. But that's, at this point, that's the best recommendation from staff, is sort of where we have it, because we can accomplish what the council asked to do, which is address these unfunded liabilities, reduce our overall debt to sewer, and hopefully come up with a more manageable plan.
No, I understand that. So do you want us to, any suggestions that we have, or is that what, you want us to hold those suggestions for a later time and just look at the budget as a whole and make a decision? Do we want to adopt it as is, or should we?
It's at the pleasure of council, but sure. I would say this, that staff has done, I think, a really good job of trying to come at all this different information and present that in a way that works. I think that because you have a balanced budget at this point, if I was queen of the forest, I would make those recommendations for tying the funds for the property sale, tying the funds for cannabis, moving that money out from the deputy city manager's position. But unless there's other things here that are super glaring, I'm not sure that it behooves us to have you adjust those tonight or today, but certainly to give staff direction to come back knowing that we're going to look at Parks and Recreation, Public Works, the lighting and landscape districts, the copiers, all these other things moving forward, where we can have a more thoughtful discussion and better information to present. But for today, I guess what I would be looking at is, if you don't see something, I'm going to use Councilman Raymond there. If Councilman Raymond's heart is not bleeding right now and hurting him in some way, I'd love to get a pass on that. I mean, I'd love us to be able to walk out of here with a support of the budget, unless there's something major, glaring, and I don't think there is, to be honest.
As amended. And I just want to make one comment, because I know that there's been some controversy lately in the Park and Recreation Department, and I know that Sandy and I have spoken on several occasions, and so I know that she's also reached out on occasion, and it's hard for her to balance. When we look at this budget, and we've asked a couple times, well, where does this go? She's asked the same questions as well. So it's very hard when she doesn't have her line items to track. She doesn't know how to answer and what to tell.
Exactly.
So it's not that I'm picking on that department. You and I have had the conversation. I think that our recreation department is extremely important to our community. So I'm glad to see that she's been given some tools so that we can track it better moving forward. And I'm hoping with that tracking system, we're able to maybe just cut a few more corners. Not more corners, but figure out where are we bleeding and where are we growing. So
you need better data to be successful.
Absolutely.
And she's been doing a great job with the limited data she has. I think both LaQuinta and I are trying to set her up to be successful.
Absolutely. I'm glad for that.
Okay. Mr. Graydon.
This for Kendall.
I'm sorry.
So with the August deadline coming, it looks like we probably will be audited no matter what anyway. What are we doing for a contingency when they come in, they say, we're going to audit you. They're going to provide their services at no cost, come in. Do we have to put any additional funds in this budget to cover what little staff time they're going to need of our people?
The audit will be obviously working with staff, and unfortunately for LaQuinta, it's going to be a really ugly couple of weeks.
More than that.
Yeah, no, what we're trying to do at this point is limit the scope of the audit. I've been speaking with the attorney's office. We do believe that an audit will happen, but we want to try to limit it in scope, and that's one of the reasons that it's very important to have this budget be crystal clear and very clean and in the right order, so we can focus that. And if that's the case, it should not be monumentally expensive, but nonetheless there will be costs associated with it. Some of that will come through legal, some of that may come through financial solvency, some of it will be staff time. But we really won't know what that dollar amount is going to be until such time as we know the nature of the audit. And it very may well occur that we come back to council and ask for additional funding or moving some funds around in order to accommodate that request.
And the audit wouldn't be as draconian and negative as it was billed out to be. It'd probably be a benefit to the city to, at the end of the day when it's all said and done.
I think, and I think we've talked about this before, over the years there have been some decisions made in the ways that things were handled that perhaps were not the best decisions. And that's frankly what the state is looking at. And the fact that the city has now moved forward to address those concerns, to make paying that debt a priority, which is a big deal, changing the way LaQuinder has laid out her funds so that they're not mixed up. For example, on H, you can't have a deficit on a measure fund. It doesn't get to do that. It's just basic things, but that's been corrected, and council's been, I think, very good about focusing on this stuff and doing the things you need to do to be prepared. What we don't want to have is them coming to Atwater and seeing a dysfunctional house. We want our house in order. We want to have a good, solid budget for them to look at, and we want to make it clear that the council is taking the steps required to get the city back on the path of solvency. That you understood what the problems were. We're not having a blame fest here. We're just getting it done and moving forward. And to the extent we can do that, that's going to make our audit much more pleasant. And then it's just a transparency issue that resolves some questions that I've spoken to several of you. There's a lot of urban myth about this too.
Yeah,
and things are just flat out wrong. So hopefully some of those can be resolved and put those skeletons away for good.
Good, thank you.
Okay. Cindy, you done? Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
So do we need a motion or some type for in regards to those the sale of real property and the cannabis fees going towards?
I'll defer to the attorney, but the answer would be yes. You do need a motion for these.
Yeah, and you can do that within the budget or separately.
Well,
and then have a
okay.
budget vote.
Also, we included the tow yard.
We need to.
Okay, is this a separate item in here? Well, we pulled it because it was part of the budget, so why did we pull it?
So
it is part of it. It is part of the budget.
Okay, but
as it is listed here, so it's still part of the budget.
It was currently in the budget, and just to be clear, the way that they were set up, I think the question that the vice mayor had was whether or not we were closing down an operation that was making money. In other words, if we're making money on it, why would we not do it? And I think the answer was, which I believe is in the report, that in fact that the franchise fees would be more money than the existing setup that we have with the tow yard.
So we need to give direction on shutting the tow yard down.
Well,
or discussion.
But as the presentation was today, we actually made $23,000 profit, almost $24,000 profit, which is more than the franchise fee.
How much is the franchise fee?
20,000.
Which was the franchise fee.
We are budgeting 20, yes.
Right, but we made a profit of almost 24,000, which is more than the franchise fee. However, my understanding is it was approximately 5 months or 6 months of.
There's no staff out there. We didn't count for that.
I understand that, but when we voted this in back, when we did this almost a year ago, to give it a year trial, we budgeted $50,000 based on no expenses. We didn't know what the expenses were, to give it 12 months. And we said, if it makes $50,000, we break even, we're great, we're even. If it makes more than that, fantastic for the city. And that was a motion made by Ms. Vieira, and I agreed upon her stipulation that if we made $50,000, because everybody was throwing the million from other cities, $500,000. It was originally set at $100,000. We set it for 50 because we felt $100,000 was too high. So let's set it at 50, and that's what we did. And we said, so let's see where, of course, it goes. There were things that didn't accomplish. We didn't ever go to the auction yards and say, hey, we got cars, how much you want to take off our hands for? We didn't go to pick and pull. So we don't know what the revenue was there. So we didn't ever complete our task of how much revenue we could actually make off of that yard, in my opinion. So there could be more revenue that we actually made. You're going with the projected we might make, but at the same token, we're now limiting our scope on who can tow in our city. So there's some other things with the contract and everything else that I have questions regards to. So it's I see the TSA here, which is the towing service agreement. I have a CHP one, which the rest of the county uses, Merced PD, Merced SO, the university, who all use that one to pretty close to the same degree, with some changes for their thing. Why aren't we using that? Why are we limiting ourselves to a 1 mile radius or tow companies and not giving the public and the city a better service by opening up that further? Those are the questions I kind of have about this whole thing.
And I think we're touching on two different things here at the moment. The TSA being one, tow yard, is another.
It's all part of the tow yard.
Oh, I understand,
yeah.
In the overall, yes, and I agree with that. So we need to tackle one at a time here, I think.
LaQuinder, in that tow yard was, whose salary is being assigned to the tow yard cost?
Well, we added only overhead cost for one admin person and one sergeant. So on average, there was about 136 hours were spent on monthly basis. So we did 100 hours on admin level and 36 hours for sergeant's time.
And Chief, how do you feel when it comes to the tow yard and the staffing of the police department? Are we adequately able to staff that tow yard with what we have right now? I mean, is it in any way a detriment to our staffing, or are we okay with it?
It definitely creates a staffing issue, especially if we've got tying up an admin sergeant or a patrol sergeant that we have to pull off the street to come and deal with post-charge hearings, which it just causes an issue in regards to that. In regards to vehicle releases, we all, again, have to pull individuals either off other assignments, such as our CSO. That's one of his other hats that he has to wear, where he has to respond out to the yard to do a vehicle release. We're tying up an admin sergeant currently for the appraisals on lien sales, and it does bog down our staffing issues, where we're, especially during the week, where we at times are limited on personnel, where we have to kind of pull people away from their current assignments to go and deal with just the vehicle releases or anything that has to do with the tow yard.
And that has to be done by an officer. It can't just in the week be done by staff?
Well, we rely on that community service officer. So if he's currently on an animal control detail, that means we've got to pull him from that or wait until he is done with that. If it's an issue of trying to get somebody out to the yard, we try and utilize a patrol. Usually we try and utilize a sergeant to keep the patrolmen out on the street, but it does tie up our staff on one end of the spectrum or the other.
Thank you.
Mr. Raymond?
This was billed as the $1 million tow yard, the solution to all of our problems. And at the end of the day, it brought in $24,000, caused much chaos and confusion within the department, and opened the city up to increased liability. It's, I think the TSA is a much better way to go than with this tow yard. We need to shut it down and give that land back to Public Works.
But Jim does have a good point where we just only have one tow company.
Well, I was reading the TSA, as it is now, it's a 1 mile radius, and there's only one tow company that fits that bill. To me, that's a monopoly. And I just think that's a disservice to the public.
I agree with that.
So, and to the city. So.
Mr. Creighton?
I believe...
Go ahead, Chief. Go ahead, Chief.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I believe there's 3 towing companies that are within that 1 mile radius currently that we're utilizing.
And do any of those have any, because just looking at the CHP one and the Merced PD one, they don't utilize any that have any misdemeanor records, and they don't utilize any that have, like drivers that don't have driver's license and stuff. So do we have any background checks on any of those 3 that are falling in those categories?
It's my understanding that the applications that's turned in, that there is a background that's done on those individuals. I do not have a copy of the CHP agreement or the Merced PD agreement here to compare them, one or the other. But we do have, again, it's my understanding, 3 towing companies that are within that 1 mile radius, and that's something that we can also look into and get back to you if that's...
Okay. Because I can give you a copy of the CHP one. I do have that. And I understand CHP is a wider, all over the county, just like the SO, so they don't really have that mile radius one. I know Merced doesn't have the mile radius one.
Correct.
But to me, you're still kind of tying the hands of people that may have that same type of business, offer just as professional a business. And competition is good. So to me, it's you're limiting people for a business, and we don't have much land in the city. I don't know, maybe that's an option for us for that portion of our yard out there, is to lease that out to one of the towing companies that doesn't have something within a yard. I mean, it's a possibility. So,
Mr. Creighton.
Okay, first off, I would never want to take any more police officers away from the job that they're doing to deal with a dysfunctional tow yard. That's the biggest boondoggle this city's ever messed with. So the quicker we put that thing to bed, the better. We keep our police department doing police activities. We've got tow companies that do tow activities. Let's move on with this. It's ridiculous that we're even talking about it. It was billed as $1 million a year. We're arguing over $23,000 a year revenue, and we don't have all the people that are associated with it in there, so it's an actual net loss.
Well, here's what, when was the last time that we towed a vehicle in there? My understanding is that it's been told, don't bring any more vehicles there. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
when,
we did have.
How many do we have over there presently?
Do you know what that? Approximately 15 to 16 vehicles currently there.
And how long have they been there?
They vary as far as the duration. And if during the post-storage hearing the storage is upheld, that vehicle will remain there for the completion of the 30 days. Then there's the lien process, affording the individual to come back for that vehicle if the fees are paid for and whatnot. What we're finding a lot of the times is that those individuals are not coming back for those vehicles, and therefore they're forfeiting them. We are now tying up staff's time and going through the lien process, getting the appraisals done, et cetera. So, and that's what I believe when the original proposal was brought to you, I believe that that was not taken into consideration, that individuals were going to forfeit their vehicles and not pay the towing fees associated with a 30-day impound.
Okay, well, do we have an agreement with anybody to go and purchase those vehicles? Because my understanding how this works is that if we have an agreement with Pick and Pull or somebody along those lines, they'll come in, they'll pay us a fair market value for a vehicle, take care of towing it out of there, or taking it wherever it goes, and taking care of the DMV.
Correct. The issue that we're finding is that on these vehicles that are being appraised, they're coming in at or below our towing fee that we have to pay the towing company to take that vehicle out to the yard. And that's not taking into consideration staff's time that was involved in the lien process, staff's time to go out there and wait for the towing company to retrieve the vehicle to take it out to wherever it's going. Okay. So that's where what's happening.
And what about the volunteers? My understanding is that volunteers have been trained to help to backfill the personnel.
To a certain extent, right now we have 3 active volunteers right now. We have, and so they're very limited as far as their availability. Mm-hmm. Right now, I believe we're primarily dealing with, we've got the paperwork that needs to go either out to the district attorney's office or taking evidence to various forensic labs for follow-up or testing. So in regards to tying up or getting a volunteer, that would be it would be a wonderful idea to have somebody just associated with that. The unfortunate part is we just do not have enough of those individuals. We've been talking about recruitments. That's something that we plan on doing, and we've got some plans in the works for that, because that would also augment our parking citations, assist us in investigations, assist the CSOs with animal control. So the unfortunate part is going out and recruiting volunteers that essentially are not getting paid and trying to find folks.
I get that. I'm talking specifically to with tow stuff.
Correct.
And getting into there and doing whatever they can do as far as I don't know, accessing the yard for a tow, getting it out, whatever.
Right.
So can we do the budget and then?
Well, this is all, I'm leading up to it because we're talking about shutting something down that personally I think is something we're getting premature on. This is something that started up in August of last year. As was pointed out, we haven't given it a full year. If it's not working, how do we make it work? I'm looking at the budget rate here where it says it generated 70,000 gross, and you know, I don't know about this 23,000. I think that number is low, but nonetheless, there's ways I think that it can work through it. We were bringing vehicles in there. My last ride-along that I did with the police was back in, I believe it was October, latter part of October, and between 6 o'clock in the evening and 11 o'clock, 3 vehicles got towed, and they had to go other places because we were maxed out. So, you know, the thing I'm wondering is, we're at 15 vehicles now. What's changed? It seems to me that, you know, there's money in there. Why else would other tow companies who have impound yards, why would they be so anxious to bring vehicles in there if there wasn't money to be made from doing that?
I'm sorry.
So, well, my point is that we still have, you know, given it the full time to go and make this, you know, one way or another. But if we're looking at only 5 months of operation with this thing at $23,000 of profit. So, I mean, the other night you were talking about $30,000 for some vest cams, you know, the personal cams and things like that, you know, equipment to use.
But if we contract this out, we'll get $110,000 income. So we'll get $110,000.
If I might make a suggestion, in the current budget, we just got a line item in there on a franchise fee of $20,000, and in the last year, after police rehab, it's $23,000. And my suggestion would be, because it seems like the council has some questions, and there needs to be perhaps more information provided, my suggestion would be to amend that line item to $25,000, and then table the discussion on whether or not it's going to be internal or external for future meetings. At this point, we already know we made $23,000, we know that. And you're allocating $20,000 for the next year budget. It's not that much different in terms of adopting your budget, but then when you come back, you can hear it.
Yeah. But it's not recording if you're not speaking into it.
You can come back in meeting after next, let's say in July, and then staff can put together a more comprehensive report with the actual costs, so you can have a really good comparison. Okay. But it doesn't seem to me tonight that you have enough information to make a decision that you're going to feel comfortable about.
I think there's enough information. There's a desire to shut it down on my part. I don't want any more information.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know what the confusion is.
Just to answer some of the mayor's questions, there's a lot of variables that happened from the last ride-along that you had on. We were running a different shift rotation. We had more officers out on the street.
Yeah,
as a result of having to eliminate some of the overtime issues, we had to change shift schedules. So we ended up actually minimizing the number of officers that are going out there, effectively reducing the number of tows or storages that the officers are doing. So that in itself would be the difference in regards to the number of vehicles that are getting into the tow yard. We try and any vehicle going into the tow yard, there is a post-storage hearing that does take place. The majority of those times, those vehicles are being returned back to the registered owner. And we're still recouping some costs associated with that once the towing bill is paid. So there's a variety of factors that have taken place, and I believe the tow yard has been in operation longer than the 5-month duration.
Well, it came into operation August of 17.
I've been here a year and a half. It's been over a year.
It's almost a year.
No, it hasn't been over a year.
We were told at least $500,000. We're talking $21,000, so it's a net loss of $475,000 in last year's budget.
Okay. Rob, did you want to speak?
Well, my light's still on.
Well, give it a try.
First of all, my hat's off to the chief. You've been very honest and upfront, and I appreciate that.
Would you identify yourself for the record?
Robert Shue. So I wanted to say a couple of things. I don't know, I'll probably jump around a little bit, but the towing business isn't all that in a cup of tea. I think that's why you guys are seeing the numbers not looking all so great anymore. The price of steel has dropped. That's a direct effect on the cost of the vehicle as far as pick and pull. They're not going to give you any money for it. When you ain't making no money for the scrap, then you ain't making no money. And that's where you guys went wrong, because you had a price that was up here and it fell on you. And that's why those numbers went out of whack. And so, with that being said, I'm here to see if I can get on rotation in the city of Atwater. I did it for 6 years with you guys. We had no problems. Everything was great. The professionalism in the towing business went. We had tow truck companies that were working for the city of Atwater that didn't have license, that were towing vehicles for people that were driving it without a license. I thought that was a little bit much. That's documented. You've got tow truck companies that are now in effect that are outside the 1 mile area that's in your tow service agreement. Been doing that for about 3 or 4 years. So it's okay to write it down, but it's not okay to enforce it. I wasn't cool with that. I've got people that are on rotation that are felons. They were convicted, they were charged for multiple felonies, and the district attorney in Merced reduced them down to 1 misdemeanor, directly affiliated with the towing industry. That's a #1 no-no. California Highway Patrol won't look at them. Don't even want them on the property. You guys are using them. The liabilities that you guys are using with these tow companies that are in town is unbelievable. We have random drug testing, background checks, top-of-the-line equipment. CHP does everything for us. They got our thumb on us, and they make sure that we play by the rules, and they do everything and they would do it for you. So the California Highway Patrol sets the guidelines, and then we go in and we get on their rotation, and then we want to be over here on your rotation, but then we look at what you guys are working with, and we're like, nah, I'm cool with that. And so there's a real big problem on the service part of it, and the liabilities. I mean, you got your 21-year-old girl that her daddy lives in Stockton. She's coming through the city of Atwater, and she gets in an accident because she jumps off at the Walmart to pick up a bottle of water. And then you put a tow truck driver in a tow truck in there with her in it, and she's wearing her little cute shorts and her tank top, and she's on her way to Stockton. Who is monitoring that driver to make sure that he's not going to have an unhealthy conversation with that young lady when they're going to Stockton? Nobody. Who is watching to make sure that when the cable breaks on the tow truck and the bystanders with their video camera are getting their head decapitated because the driver's using a bad cable and he doesn't know what he's doing? Who's handling that? Nobody is monitoring nothing. I talked to Tina Lamison one time and asked her why she did not do a background check on the driver that didn't have a license, and she said, we check Megan's law. Well, there's a hell of a lot more than that needs to be looked into. Now, with all that being said, we go through that whole strong criteria, and then we turn around and we try to compete with these guys, and we can't do it. You guys are realizing there's not a lot of money there. I can't afford to pay $5,000 a month to be in your community and help you, but I can do it from my place, which is on Beechwood, 3 miles away. I can bring me and my other half's team in here. We can bring the quality up, adopt the contract that the state of California uses, implement it. That's going to get rid of your riffraff. No more PJs coming out, flip-flops, none of that. The city's liabilities are going to go out the window. The coverage that we have and the insurance is amazing. And then we'll take the cars and we'll deal with them. And we'll release them so that the police department doesn't have to deal with trying to get somebody over there to do it. And we'll get them out the window. We'll take care of everything. And then you guys just charge us so much per tow. Hey, you know what? We called you out here. We're giving you a little, we're throwing you a bone. This is what we're going to charge you for every tow. Every time you come here and you do a tow, this is what you owe us. We're going to bill you. You're going to pay it. If you don't pay it, you're out of here. And I think that's the best way for this council to do it, is just that way you're getting your money and you ain't having to do nothing. And that's the way you make money. And we'll take care of it because we're already in the business. We're already set up to handle it. It's not going to be a big problem for us. You change the radius to 3 miles, you're going to get 2 more companies in and 3 out. You're going to get rid of the riffraff. You're going to adopt the TSA. Merced PD has a TSA that was originally made by the state of California, and they went in and they changed the wording in it to fit the Merced Police Department. They changed it from the state to the city, and you have a copy of that. And if you just, city attorney looks at it, you guys accept that and make it the way it is, and then charge us a flat fee, this problem will be resolved. The chief won't have to deal with trying to staff everybody. The guys can go out, they can work, they can tow them, they can call us, we can get it done. We don't have the liabilities, there's no more crap. But we got to figure out how much we're going to charge. And that's where you guys are going to have to make those decisions to see if it's worth it. I think it would work out, but you got to give me a 3 mile radius instead of a 1 mile. There's no, look, let's get real. The city of Atwater is a beautiful town. Everybody in Merced wants to come here, and if they're not coming here, they're wanting to go to Oregon. That's the reality of it. Over here where the Walmart and the Target is and everything, that's all looks nice, the CHP over there. We all know, I live in Merced, I've been here 54 years, between 99 and Atwater Boulevard, there's an eyesore. We all know it. If we could put a D9 cat there and level that place and build it up, it'd be great. Problem solved, but you can't. Why would you want more tow companies in here? They're not attractive. They've got beat up cars and tires, and I mean, they're nasty. If you move the radius, you're going to bring it out and get it back over here in the county away from you. You don't have to look at it. You don't have to deal with it. You have Always out there on Winton Way in Winton, and you'll have me on Beechwood, and you don't have to look at the mess. You don't have to deal with the going and releasing the cars. Just charge a flat fee. That's just my opinion. I appreciate you guys listening to me.
And you don't speak publicly.
No, I'm just trying. I'm just hungry, Mayor. And if I can get over here and make a little money, and I'm going to do
understand.
it. But no, I mean, we're offering a real service, though. You know what I mean? It's just time to adopt that and get things changed.
Well, I'm concerned about.
So you guys think about it.
Let me ask you this: what would your professional feelings be if we just went and said a 30-minute response?
So
rather than be locked into a mileage.
I would disagree with it because, well,
PD couldn't wait around 30 minutes.
If you do 3 miles, then I get to get in, but nobody else does. If you do 30 minutes, you're going to bring half of Merced with us.
Okay.
Now you're going to have a bunch of people here.
That's why I'm asking.
And I don't know if that would be good either, because then you've got all that going on.
Okay.
So that's the bottom line. But there's got to be maybe 5 miles, I don't know, but at least you can give it some kind of radius so people can, if they want to come into town and they want to get within the radius and they want to pay the fees to, rent the property and stuff, I guess go ahead, but I couldn't afford it. I paid $2,500 a month to Hanson, then I turned around and staffed it for almost $2,000. And then with the alarm system, because we were constantly getting broken into, I was into $5,000 a month. I couldn't make it. I had to pill out. And I wanted to get the other companies that weren't complying out of here, and I came in here to try to talk about that. It all went sour. Everything went to crap. I just said, I'm out of here. I went back to Merced, where I came from, and I stayed there. And I'm willing to come back, and I think that I could do good for the city. I think that we could, I think that Always and T&B is a good company. I've worked with them. I know them. I know Brandon. They're good. They have the quality service and the equipment, and they know the game. And we do too. But there's a few that you've got on here that I just think are just, they scare me. I don't know if I don't know. It just needs to be looked at more.
Okay.
Just to kind of maybe clarify something, and it was just brought to my attention too, and I didn't even take it into consideration. With the annexation of the corner there on Gurr Road, that may actually put you within that 1 mile radius. I'm not sure. I'd have to take a look at it, but that was just something that was brought to my attention.
We did our homework. It's 2.76 miles, Chief.
From
the nearest.
No, we just annexed.
No, we just annexed Ashby and Gurr.
Yeah, right there at Gurr and Avenue 2 area, right there, the way the road travels, it's 2.7 miles, roughly.
Yeah, but that's land travel. How about how the bird flies?
Miles as the crow flies.
Well, that was the difference. We didn't know how you guys looked at it, because I thought that whenever like officers take cars home and things, this is just what I heard through the Merced, that you guys look at the actual mileage, not the way the crow flies when you give them a perimeter or whatever. So I figured it was done the same way.
So you'd be comfortable with 3?
3 will get me in. I don't know what's fair to the rest of the people. I know the world doesn't revolve around me.
One is pretty small.
Yeah.
I think we should at least do 3. But
Chief,
30 is
can I make
pretty
a
far. Now
recommendation?
we're in Turlock and Chowchilla and everywhere else. So
30 is pretty crazy, because we could respond from Beechwood and Santa Fe with no on-ramp to the freeway to La Grande in less than 30 minutes at 2 o'clock in the morning out of a dead sleep. So you can imagine what kind of people, how many you would have here.
Yeah,
I get it.
Our current agreement allows for a 30-minute response time anyway, currently, regardless of where they're at right now. So,
so does
whenever we call in, we have.
So does the PD, the Merced PDs and the CHPs. They both are standard 30 minutes. So may I make a suggestion? I'll give you the copies that I have, and you can look at that and then look at the mileage.
Definitely, yes.
And then make a motion to increase the franchise fee to 25,000 on the budget.
Okay, so
Okay.
are you making a motion to approve the budget with the franchise
Yes,
fee at
franchise.
25,000?
Correct.
With the monies coming in from the marijuana and the real property to be allocated to the wastewater debt relief?
Yes.
I second that.
Okay.
What?
Brian,
Which
did
will close the tow yard, correct.
Okay.
You were going to end on that, setting aside the deputy city manager.
Yes.
50,000 and move that over to reserve until such time as you need to move it back.
Yes.
I think you have to make that motion. I don't think I get to do that.
Okay, Jim?
That is, okay, I'll make, okay, let me do this in two separate motions then, correct?
No, do just one continuous.
Can we, do we need all three?
You could say as she stated for last point.
Okay. Now, let me just do this way. I'd like to move the deputy city manager's vacant position funds to the reserve. At the same time, make sure that the sale of the real property, the cannabis fees, and the franchise tax fee, which is now raised to $25,000, all go towards paying off the sewer fund first, and the closing of the tow yard is included in that.
And I seconded that.
Okay.
Brian, your light is on here so long, it's almost like it's flaming. Go ahead.
Well,
I think him and I pushed about the same.
Super excited that we're finally getting out of competing with private business. Glad that's happening. But to the Mayor Pro Tem's motion, what I wanted to see included, and was actually going to make a motion, if anybody can believe that, is if by some miracle we sell our properties, bring in enough revenues for the cannabis that we can eliminate our debt, that the surplus funds that come from that go to public safety, because it's the only two departments that were really, well, not only two, there's a couple others, but we freezing positions, and they're both short-staffed anyways.
Hold that thought, because I want to talk to you about something. So if you can hold that thought until another time, because we have a tax thing we have to put on the ballot.
Yeah, the 218. I mean, we can readdress that. That's not a problem.
There's our motion in a second anyways.
You can always amend.
I have no.
Okay, so can we have the motion restated again, please? Because I'm not sure I even know what.
Lisa, do you have it too?
You know what? I think
I'll change it on you.
Okay, so we have the 50,918 from the deputy city manager moved to reserve, right?
Yes.
All costs.
About
Yes.
$100,000.
Plus benefit, yeah.
Plus benefits.
Associated, correct?
Okay, the $25,000 for the tow yard,
Franchise fee.
Franchise.
a minute, franchise
Franchise
fee.
yes.
Okay, then we have the property sale and the cannabis, real property sales and the cannabis to pay back the sewer fund,
Correct.
correct?
And the closing of the tow yard.
And the closing of the tow yard.
And we can't put the additional funds would go to public safety, one?
Is that part of your?
Well, it'd have to be after all those things are paid off. We can make that amendment. I don't have a problem.
That's what I said, if by some slim chance there's any money left, we'd like to allocate it to public safety.
I'll approve that amendment.
Okay, I like that amendment.
And the second will amend?
Yes.
Okay.
But I still want to talk to you about something else.
So that may read then, so once debt is paid, remaining funds will go directly to
Public safety.
public safety.
Of the
or-
sale of real property.
Exactly.
Okay. Is that all of it?
Yeah, I believe so.
Call for the question.
Oh, that's just for the amendment.
Oh, we're closing the public hearing, by the way.
Okay.
That's just for the amendments, correct? Then we'll have to make a motion to approve the budget, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Creighton,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Don't make me throw anything at you.
Viera,
Yes.
Vineyard,
Yes.
Price.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Motion to approve the budget.
Second. You guys are asleep over there.
Call for the question.
Vineyard.
Yes.
Viera.
Yes.
Creighton.
Yes.
Raymond.
What is this again?
Approval of the budget.
I thought we just approved the budget.
That
No.
was for the
Amendment.
That was the amendment.
Oh, okay, yes.
Price.
Yes.
Did it.
Motion carries.
All right.
Okay, we have one other resolution on here, but before you consider that, I am recommending that it be amended to approve the salary schedule A19 with the effective date to coincide with ratification of labor agreements.
So moved.
Is there a second? Sound like it. Sounds like it dies for a sufficient second.
Kendall, question on this before,
Yes, sir.
can you go back over this real quick for us?
Are we talking about the salary schedules?
Right.
Yes. And I'm unclear what the question is.
Well, where are we at on this? Is it,
Can we make a motion to put that to the next meeting? Because I think there's still questions that some of us have about that. Can we delay it?
I'll second that.
You can.
Yes, I'll make that motion. That
Mine
will
died,
postpone
so.
any vote on that till the next meeting.
On the salary schedule?
Yes.
And I'll second it again.
what was yours?
Did we?
Salaries and classifications.
Not the salary.
Okay. Everybody clear? Okay, call for the question.
Raymond.
Yes.
Creighton.
Yes.
Viera. Vineyard.
Yes.
Price.
Yes.
Motion carries.
No, I think it came up.
Is there any other business anybody would like to talk about? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.